Welcome to Behind the Badge. This podcast aims to improve the health and well-being of frontline workers. Each episode features candid conversations with former and current frontline community members and subject matter experts. Join us as we explore the unique nature of serving in high-risk roles, sharing inspiring stories of resilience, strategies, and resources. We are not qualified health professionals, nor are we aligned with any organization. The opinions expressed in the podcast are solely our own. Additionally, the content may evoke strong emotional responses for some. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey team, before we get into today's episode, just a quick reminder. If you've been getting value from Behind the Badge, please hit follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need it. This small gesture really helps us keep this thing going. Now, today's guest is someone who's lived and studied discomfort at the highest levels. Dan Cooper spent over 20 years in the Australian Army, and the majority of that in the elite Special Air Service Regiment. Since leaving the military, he's turned his attention to the science of high performance, pushing physical and psychological boundaries through research, endurance events, and his own lived experience. Dan speaks openly about the limits of identity, the hidden cost of peak performance, and why resilience isn't something that you get. It's something that you earn through process, presence, and pressure. In this conversation, we dig into the psychology of Special Forces selection, why suffering reveals who you really are, letting go of identity after service, and what it means to keep growing when there's nothing left to prove. This one's measured, honest, and razor sharp. Let's get into it. Welcome aboard, Dan Cooper.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me along.
Mate, thanks for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. What we might do to start off with, mate, is just flick back to the start of your timeline, maybe an introduction, a little bit of background into your growing up and then your military service, and then we'll get into post-military.
Yep. Yeah, so I had a fairly, I think, normal upbringing. So I grew up in New South Wales at the foothills of the Lower Blue Mountains. Dad was a bricklayer. Mum was a stay-at-home mum. So pretty much just went and did schooling, was a middle-of-the-road student. Had ambitions of playing rugby league out in Western Sydney, which didn't go anywhere, probably for a number of reasons. Mostly, I think, talent was the big one. Got I think about an average mark on my HSC is what it was back then, and then went and did a trade. So I was a apprentice cabinet maker, detailed shop fitter or detailed joiner for a number of years, and then finished that and joined the army. And then from there, I sort of went in the infantry. I had a sort of fascination about jumping out of planes, and at that point, I'd sort of had a fear of heights, so I thought, why not go on to the airborne to sort of take that on, and never overcame that. I still don't like heights. So I went in there for a few years, and then had a real fascination before I joined the military about looking at special operations. So I didn't know much about it at the time. It was still fairly secretive, a lot less information than what's around now about it. So I thought I'd give that a go just to see whether I had it in me and what that would be like. Did selection in 2001, at the very start of 2001, and then started a really long career in the SAS that sort of seen me do some very unique work.
Did you have any influences to join the military in the first place? Was there any like family lineage or anyone around you that sort of pushed you that direction?
Not really historically. So I think my great-grandmother's brother or two of them were in the First World War. I think one of them died from pneumonia, I think maybe the other one came back. So that's about it. Grandfather was World War II, but never left Australia. He was in the Air Force here, so I think he was just doing some work on the planes, like mechanic type stuff. My brother joined the army before I did, which is probably where the interest come from. But I always had a bit of a fascination with it. And growing up, you watch a lot of the sort of Commando, Green Beret, Chuck Norris movies, all those sort of old ones. So I don't know, I think it was just a curiosity around it, a bit of a fascination, and I kind of just enjoyed the idea of being in a job where I sort of was out being active, I suppose, as well. I didn't really want to go and do something sort of more office-based at that point in time.
Yeah, cool. So joined up, and then 2001, you said you had a crack at SAS selection. Was that prior to 9/11?
Yeah, so it was. So I initially applied mid 2000, I think it was. And I'd gotten through, but then Timor sort of started off, and where I was, we got deployed to Timor. So I sort of got offered to come back and do selection that year or stay in Timor on deployment. Because no one had deployed for such a long time, I decided, well, we've deployed now, so I'm going to stay here and just do it when I get back. And I came back, did selection the following year. And then while I was on my reinforcement cycle where we do all our training, is when 9/11 happened. So because I'd already done the freefall course, that was one of the last courses they were doing on the reinforcement cycle. I was actually taken off the cycle early, put into one of the squadrons, and went to Afghanistan in 2002. So pretty much did my training. Basically, at the end of that, I was straight off on deployment with one of the other dudes from the reinforcement cycle.
Yeah, right. Straight into it.
Yeah. So why not? Why wait?
Hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So, mate, from there, first trip, what does that look like for you? How long was that trip?
Yeah, so that trip then was 6 months. So we did 3 trips of 6 months. So I went on the second one. So because I was still in the middle of my training when it happened, and the squadron that was on that or rotating through that role at the time, they did their 6 months. We then replaced them, and then we got replaced, and then we sort of withdrew for a short period, or for a couple of years, and then I can't remember the incident. I think it was a group of SEALs were in quite a large ambush up on the border. And then that kind of was the impetus for everyone to go back in, I think around 2005. So I was just doing mostly training up until then. And we had a lot of sort of skill sets that we had to maintain and a lot of commitments that we'd sort of do. So we'd just rotate through certain roles. And it was quite a good job. Like your training's always something new. There's not much monotony in there. It's a pretty exciting sort of thing. So I was sort of enjoying it. And then we went back in 2006, I think it was, a second rotation, and then it was kind of a rotation every other year almost from there. So I think you do 2 rotations in 3 years, and we just go through that cycle up until about 2013.
Wow. So how many in total? How many times did you go to Afghanistan in total?
So within that, there's a number of smaller trips that we do. So we do like security escorts, those sort of things. So in total, I think it was 6 deployments that were 4 months or greater, and then 6 deployments from about a month to 4 months, and then anything under that I just didn't worry about counting.
Yeah, wow. And then, like you said, in between that, you've still got training commitments and things like that.
Yeah, so we sort of still keep all our roles. So when we started deploying, we essentially just got busier. So we were sort of holding the domestic counterterrorism. So I think it was early on they sort of had started raising the commando unit. It was 4 OR into which what became 2 commando. So they'd sort of been raising them, and then they decided that they would become TAG East and we'd become TAG West, because it just wasn't feasible for us to hold tags on both sides of the country, plus deployments, plus all the other commitments that we had. So we sort of split into that. And thankfully TAG West really didn't require much, so there wasn't much workload there for us as far as like actual operations go, sort of thing. But we had done a few. So I was on the Pong Su when it happened in 2003 maybe. So we'd done a little bit of the maritime stuff still, but we sort of split that role and then maintained some of the other ones. And then you've got all the army promotional stuff that you got to do. So like it's a pretty big workload that we're maintaining, sort of thing. So like and that created some of its own problems over time. Like you do that for 10 years, you get sort of pretty drained of it. So guys are sort of looking at ways to take a little bit of time off here and there. And we do have training squadrons. So guys would rotate through the training squadron, or once you get to a certain way through your career, you'd go through there, spend a year there. You'd sort of help out with or run the training courses for the new Rios when they come through. You'd work on the selection, that sort of stuff. So you'd have a little bit of a break, but it was a pretty big operational tempo.
Sounds fucking full on, to be honest. And like you said, I just imagine like just, keeping that tempo for an extended period of time would be.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that when you're busy, you kind of don't notice how fast it's going. And the work that you're enjoying, you don't really mind so much. So it's the work that you're not enjoying. So like some of the stuff that we didn't think was as relevant for us that we had to do is what probably caused most of the grief and people complaining. But it does go by pretty quick, sort of thing. So, and then kind of, I was looking at a few other things I could do within that. Then you've got all your family stuff. So my wife was starting her own business, all that sort of thing. So, you are under a fair bit of, I don't know, pressure and tempo for a fair amount of time.
Wow. How did your role? So you got in 2002.
Yeah, so 2001 I went in, and then Rio finished about 2002.
Yep. So from that point, how up until say 2013, how did your role change in the unit?
So when I first went there, it's mostly back then. It's changed a little bit now, and it's evolved like most places need to do over time. It was based on insertion skills, so it was put into sort of three parts. So you had your mobility guys who basically just drove everywhere. You had your water operations, which did all the diving, boats, that sort of stuff, and then your air ops, which did all the free fall and that sort of thing. So when I first got there, we didn't have enough people to do all three insertions. So we just had mobility. So I think there was 3 or 4 of us. We all went and did mobility, so that's where I started. And then after my first rotation, I was interested in water operations. I came back, did the water course, and then moved into water operations. So then within that, you kind of just, like anywhere else, you sort of rotate through your sort of roles that we had there and the unit capabilities. Each time you go through, you may change your role within the team. And there's a number of different roles that you have, sort of for your so operations within sort of jungle environments or the bush or your green roles type stuff, and then your counterterrorism type roles and these sort of things. There'll be different positions within the team, so you just rotate through them, and then you sort of work your way into becoming the 2IC for the team, and then the team leader. Before you get to team leader, you'll do all your instructional courses or your leadership courses, those sort of things. So you kind of just work your way through the hierarchy or sort of the rank structure over time, and that itself takes about 10 to 15 years. And then there's positions above that where you're kind of progressing, but that's outside the teams where you're starting to look at being the troop sergeant and then the squadron commander, also the squadron sergeant major, those sort of things. So
Yep.
Much like every other sort of government organisation, it has that hierarchical structure, and people just mostly work their way through that.
Yeah. Yep. So 2013, is that sort of when those trips sort of wrapped up for you guys?
Yeah, so we started pulling out of Afghanistan around about then. Trips didn't really stop. They kind of just changed. So instead of doing large deployments, it was a lot of smaller deployments. So I still did a number of small ones up until I think 2016 was the last time I deployed. And then depending on the roles that people were in, they're still doing a lot of work around that. Not necessarily the type of kinetic type work that we're doing for a long time, but just doing other roles that the unit held.
Yep. And did you find yourself rotating in and out of, say that training cell for a break at any point? Like, or were you maintaining that high tempo?
I took a little bit of a break for a while. So I rotated a year through our water cell or water wing. So I was helping to run the water course and those sort of things, looking after that side of it. Then back into the squadron, and I'd moved up a rank progression when I went back in. And then I sort of got to a point where things were starting to slow down a little bit. I had an interest in sort of human performance, so I went and did some academic study. So that's where I started going down the academic pathway. I put in a proposal to go and do sports science. I'd then feed that information back in to try and develop a bit of a sort of a physiological pillar for a human performance program. And there was another member that was looking at psychology, and it was sort of happened around the same time. So we kind of formalized it a little bit. So I went and did sports science degree for a couple of years. During the undergrad, for the most part, I was still working. So I'd go to work. I was allowed to attend the university presentations as long as it didn't interfere with something really important. So if we just had normal training on and they were happy, then I could go and do that. Where if we had something decent on, then I'd just try and have to get the notes. And back then they weren't putting everything online, so you had to actually attend in person. And the university was happy with that because they had an elite athlete program, I think they called it, where if they had somebody who was at like an institute of sport or something like that, then they could come and go as they pleased to a degree or within reason, and they had a bit of flexibility around it. So they just put me on that because I just explained my circumstances and I was able to do that study. And then I moved on to doing the masters, which was all online anyway, so I just did that in my own time. But after I'd done the undergrad, they got serious about raising a human performance program, so I took a year away from the operational side of things into helping to develop the human performance program and change the way we did our physical preparation, start to collect a bit of data on our selections, look at the pre-selection program, and start to look at how we reduce our injuries and how we improve the longevity of the operator. And it's very similar in a lot of roles, is that we had really high injury rates. and you're losing people early in their career because of injuries that are potentially preventable, or we could reduce the amount of chronic load that joint or that area is taking. So we sort of had a number of people leave with injuries that was somewhat preventable.
Yeah, right. And at what stage was that you conducted all that study and had the year off?
So I think the study began in about 2010. So 3 years from undergrad, and then I did my master's after that. So I think it was maybe around 2012-ish. I took a year off. But then I did a rotation in between the university semesters anyway. So
As if you weren't fucking busy enough.
So yeah, I got back to uni and everyone's talking about their holidays. Like, what are you doing? I said, I just chilled at home. But I got back a bit late. So I still kept myself busy with that stuff. Sort of like the workload's there, somebody has to go, sort of thing. But you work out how to manage it. Like if you've been doing it for a while, you work out how to be efficient with your time and how to manage that stuff. And then I sort of took that year off, helped raise that sort of thing. And then I was at the point where I'd reached sort of team leader within the teams. And once you get there, there's not a lot of people. So there was a bit of pressure on me to go back into the squadrons and become operational again. So I sort of spent a little bit more time in the human performance program trying to help that mature, and then ended up back in the teams and then kind of just feeding back information into the program as best I could, sort of thing. And it sort of, and then another dude rotated out of teams into that position. So it's kind of got built down its own pathway.
That's awesome. It's probably very beneficial to have someone not only qualified, but with the experience of having gone through the training and working and operating in that environment to help build the program as well, I imagine.
Yeah, so we sort of stole the idea in the most part from overseas. So in the US, they'd done a very similar thing. They're a little bit ahead of us with it. But they had a lot more money than what we had to do it. So they basically just put contracts for professional strength and conditioning coaches or professional performance coaches through a number of different disciplines that they were looking at. They just created these contracts, bring people in. So they would have people with industry experience, and then they'd have them sitting next to somebody in green or from the operational side of things. So they had them side by side type of thing. So one's got the domain knowledge for human performance, the other one's got the domain knowledge for what's actually required within that task or those tasks, and then they'd work together. Well, we weren't fortunate enough to be able to create the contracts, so we had to go and educate ourselves. Yep. But obviously, we've got good experience from within the operational side of things that we've been doing for 10 years, but we don't have 10 years worth of application. So you can go and get the university knowledge, but the art of it is how you apply that knowledge or how you apply that science. So that's what we're sort of lacking to a degree. So it would have been nice to get some like contracts going. Plus it also gives you that sort of continuity, because within those roles, people rotate through every couple of years. So if you've got somebody that's been there for a while and it's the right person, is that they can have a really long glide path, making sure that you're heading in the right direction all the time, rather than trying to revisit things that have been done before that they haven't seen, or, it kind of gets pushed all over the place about different people's opinions of what they should be doing, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So there's pros and cons for it. And that's ideally where we wanted to head. It just never really got to that point.
Yeah, right. Did you see that program mature though, and did you see some good benefit out of that, the implementation of that?
Yeah. Early on, it had really good benefit. It kind of got consumed by the organisation, so it's sort of, I haven't been involved in it for a number of years, but it kind of sat there for a while. Like it just got over, or the broader army took control of it, and then they used their PDIs to run it, sort of thing. And nothing against the PDIs, but they're trained within the military to be really good at sort of running really large classes for large groups of people, those sort of things. So they're not given the opportunity. And there's a few that have gone out and educated themselves, but they're not really provided with the same level of knowledge that you'd get from like a sports science degree or something like that. I know the RAF have got sports scientists in now through their general entry level. So they've got them coming through the ranks, which will make a big difference over time. But the army side of it has kind of relied on doing things the way it's always done. They just relabeled it, essentially all they did. But there's a lot more information out there now for people to sort of get onto and start to look at and that sort of thing. So it's definitely improving. It's just happening at its own rate.
Yeah, right. So back into the teams as a team leader, 2000.
Yeah, 13, 14, I think it was.
Yep.
About there for a few years. And then it was around about 2017. So we started having kids in 2012. We had our first and our second 2014. And then even though we weren't deploying, you're still spending anywhere from 8 to 9 months away a year, sort of thing, with all your training, courses, all that sort of stuff. So I wasn't really in a position where I wanted my kids growing up without me in the house, because I've subsequently seen the data on sort of, the issues, and they're both boys, and specifically with boys, the issues that they have with an absent father. And I didn't really want my wife being essentially a single mum for the most part of the year. It's just not fair on her. So I started looking at or my transition from the military. And I'd been in at that stage for close to 20 years anyway, so it was probably about due. So then I started looking at options, and I got a little bit of a network going within the strength and conditioning community within sport. And then an opportunity came up at the Queensland Reds over here, which is what brought me to Queensland. So I got a job as the assistant to the high performance or the strength and conditioning, the lead strength and conditioning coach there. Sorry. So I came over and did a couple of years there, just sort of looking at how they do things in sport.
And how was the transition out? Because like you said, you've done nearly 20 years.
Yep.
And secondly, were you able to apply your knowledge from your military experience into elite sport?
A little. So I was interested in getting the knowledge and experience that you could get from people that have been doing it in sport for 15 years or so, 10, 15 years. Sort of thing. Because one of the issues when you raise something yourself, it is a little bit of a sheltered workshop. Unless you get out and talk to people, you're not going to find new ways of doing things. So you're constantly trying to search for things. You don't have somebody mentoring you so much, or sort of asking whether there's better way to do things, that sort of thing. So your development probably not as rapid. So I was interested in that, getting as much of that knowledge as I could. As far as some of the military stuff, it's very much kind of based around the amount of load that people carry over time. So a lot of it's actually being more conservative. So it's very easy to motivate that group. That what you generally have to do is try and stop them from coming in training when they shouldn't be training. So getting them to rest more was probably the biggest thing. So when we had really good benefits from that program, it was actually taking stuff out.
Right.
So when we reduced the amount of physical training they did, because the daily training that they're doing creates enough of a load that if you want to put anything on top of it, it's a risk of injury for the most part. So it was when they had really high demand training cycles, we just get them to take training out, the physical training side of things out of it. When they were doing less demanding stuff, then you could put the physical training back in. So we reduced a lot of the stuff around anything that was putting more load in the lower back because they're carrying weight all the time. Anything that was lifting overhead, because generally the shoulders are at risk because they're so fatigued, because that's where a lot of the weight sits. So we're just looking at where they're being fatigued, what lifts we take out, what we could do. And mostly they're an older group, and usually they're carrying 1 to 2 injuries anyway. So it was more or less reducing, where when you go to sport, it's loading. Like it's all around loading. A lot of it was around GPS meters, because I was doing rugby union. So we're monitoring their running loads. You're trying to find that sweet spot where you can load them up as much as you can almost without risk of injury. But it's really hard to determine where that is. So and this is something I've had conversations with some really intelligent people afterwards, is kind of, we're very good at looking through data retrospectively and saying, oh, this is what caused the injury. But at the time, that pattern isn't that easy to pick up. Like, it's really hard to go, okay, well, these 3 things, they're likely to lead to injury. It's just, it doesn't seem to work like that.
Is that just due to the individual nature of each person?
There's so many factors. So, and I'll probably talk to about a little bit later, is kind of, I look at complexity a lot, or emergence. So the injury essentially just emerges based on all of these factors, and you can only see so many of them before it happens. So like, we had some players who were down the Gold Coast, so we'd be starting the program at 7 o'clock. So if they wanted physio, they have to come in at 6:30, get their physio. So to leave from the Gold Coast and get there at 6:30, like, these guys are getting out of bed somewhere between 4 and 4:30 essentially. So you do that for a number of weeks, your risk of injury goes up regardless. So we don't know, how long are they sitting in the car for? When do they get out of bed? What time do they actually go to bed? Well, they're up till 1 in the morning playing Fortnite, or, whatever they're doing online, scrolling through social media, whatever it is. So there's all these other contributing factors that you don't see. You're just trying to monitor what's right in front of you, type of thing. So it's really difficult to sort of determine. So in sport, you're essentially trying to load them up as much as you can pre-season Then get to the season itself, and you're trying to maintain your key players on the field for the duration of the season. So it was a very different environment because you're always kind of pushing. If someone gets injured, the coach wants them back as quick as they can because everyone's under pressure for wins. Where, back in the tactical environment, you don't need people at their peak. You just need to be able to do their job, essentially. So if they're being maintained at 70% and they're still doing their job, why do you need to push them too hard?
So essentially doing the minimum amount of work to be able to be at that optimal or effective level.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. You're trying to put the minimum dose on to a degree, essentially. So because there's no pre-season, there's no real off-season, there's just work.
Yeah.
If you're looking at 7 years, it's more, being conservative, just getting smaller gains week to week, month to month, and they're going to be better for it in the long run. Where if you're trying to push them really hard, this is where you see a lot of injuries go, because a lot of the information that you see in the research comes from pre-season programs, or because a university term is like 12 weeks or whatever it is, and most PhD students or research students will take a 12-week term because it fits really neatly. So they'll do real high intensity or high volume research programs, or look at a pre-season program, and then that's what gets published, and then people see that and go, okay, this is what you do. But you can't do a pre-season program for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. Like, it's too much for people. So people that don't understand are trying to follow these sort of fast gain programs for really extended periods, and it doesn't work. So in the military, and even within roles where you're operational daily, is one, you don't want to fatigue yourself before you go on shift, because the consequences of that, or the risk of really detrimental consequences, can be too high. And two, like, seconds aren't the same in a tactical environment as they are at the Olympics. You know what I mean? So
all the consequences are different, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's other things that people can do to be better at the job anyway. So you don't have to push as hard. You don't have access to all the recovery facilities, the physios. You're not getting nutrition sponsorship, all these other things. So, sport is its own environment where you can push quite hard, knowing that you can deload them. You've got access to all these things where they can accelerate their recovery, where in the tactical environment, they don't have that. Where I was in the military, probably has a little bit more structure than, say, somewhere like a fire station or police officers or those sort of things, where, you've got your shift rotation, but that doesn't mean you're not going to come in on a day off. Like, that doesn't mean you're not going to come do overtime, those sort of things. So, it's a lot harder to go, okay, I'm going to work really hard in this block. If you turn up fatigued, and then that compromises your ability to do your job, then that compromises the team's performance. And, there's this whole heap of consequences to that second and third order effect. So, one of the big things that I noticed coming out was just the fact that you can be a little bit more conservative in a tactical environment. You don't have to, you're not training for the Olympics. You're just training to be good at be competent at your job, solve all your problems without draining your energy too much, and then be able to turn up tomorrow and do the exact same thing, and do that for the duration of your career without any long-term or chronic injuries that are going to kind of diminish the capacity for you to enjoy whatever life is once you leave that career.
I imagine that would have been a hard sell in the unit to come back and go, guys, do less.
You don't get full buy-in, that's for sure. The older guys do, because they're in pain every day.
Yeah.
Like, there's guys there who, they come in and they go, they didn't like, or they get to a point where they don't like smashing themselves every day anyway. Because they come in and someone go, this is what we're doing today. And they're like, no. Like, I couldn't pick my kid up this morning because my back was so sore. I'm not doing that. It's like, I just need something that gets me through the day pain-free, and then I can do that tomorrow again. So some of them didn't mind. The young guys come in, and they're out to prove something, and like most young dudes are. So they're the ones that want to push really hard. So restricting some of them is difficult. Some of them is like, all right, this is a better way of doing it. You can come and see me in 10 years and tell me whether I'm right or not. And you're just like, you can't force somebody to do something. You can just show them better information. What I did find was that you always have your early adopters who want to do something. So they'll come in, they'll do it. Other people will see the benefits of it, and they go, okay, well, I want in on that. And then slowly it starts to spread. If it's working, if it's not working, then everyone leaves. Like, no one's interested in it. So in that environment, people vote with their feet, really. Like, if people are coming to you, then you've got a good word. Like, what people are saying, oh, yeah, no, I feel good, I'm pain-free, I can do this, that sort of thing. You should jump on board.
Yep. Just that, leading by example.
Yeah, so that's kind of tells you whether you're having a positive effect or not.
On the human performance side of things, you mentioned a number of different things that were affecting the players. For example, what they're eating, how they're sleeping, the time travel, blah blah blah,
Yep.
all these different factors that would affect their physical performance. Is that similar for their mental, emotional performance as well?
Yeah, 100%.
So there's exactly the same.
Yeah, you can't really, and this kind of went down where I got into more in-depth sort of research around the cognitive side of things and some of the neuroscience I'm getting into now, is that your body is an organism, so it's a system, complex adaptive system. So we isolate, say, physiology from psychology, from neuroscience, all these things. So we isolate things into an academic discipline for the purposes of qualifications, essentially. And it's easy to teach like that, but your body doesn't differentiate any of that. Like, it just works as a system. So fatigue is fatigue. So if you're mentally fatigued or physiologically fatigued, it has a bidirectional effect. So, and you'd feel it, like if you have a really big day where you're doing a lot of physical effort, but you haven't had to make many decisions, you still feel mentally fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there's a problem at the end of the day, you're kind of looking at it like, oh, can that wait till tomorrow? Like, you go home and your kid's sick or something like that, and you kind of make yourself unavailable because you're out of energy. You don't want to deal with that so much. And it's the same as if you've made a lot of decisions, or you've been in a course that's really mentally demanding. Like, you go to the gym, you just feel really flat. You don't feel like it. Or if you go for a run, it's a real slow run because you're fatigued. So it does come down to a perceptual thing. So there is a perceptual element of how we perceive we're fatigued, and that comes down, and a lot of this is still theoretical, but it's pretty good theory. And some of it's kind of in the process of being proven that it's the most likely mechanism. But science only knows so much, and it only answers the question that's being asked at the time. And the results based on just how good that research is. And when you look at it a lot of the research out there is actually pretty average. So it's sort of this energy thing. So we're constantly trying to predict how much energy we're going to have to spend on certain activities, and then whether we've got that energy available, and then whether there's more energy afterwards in case something really bad happens at the end of the day, or we have to solve a really big problem, so that we can get to the end of the day, sleep, recover, restore our energy, and then go and deal with tomorrow. So a lot of it is around perception. And a really big thing for me, when it changed my whole perception around it, was one of the adventure races I did a number of years ago. So, and we kind of spoke a little bit about this earlier, was I sort of got into ultra racing and then kind of ultra endurance stuff, and then almost extreme adventure racing. I don't even know what you call it. I don't even think it has a name. So I'd done a 730 kilometre, it was a 430 mile race through the Yukon in Alaska during the winter. So you drag your sled full of basically everything you need, knowing that you're going to resupply your food every sort of 3 to 4 days. And some of the checkpoints you can have a hot meal, so you sort of don't have to take all the food for the duration of the time. So I went and did that, and it was kind of really good conditions, and it was a difficult race, but it wasn't environmentally that difficult. And that lulled me into a false sense of security about how these races went. So then I went and looked at a 1,000-mile race that you do in Alaska on the Iditarod Trail. But to do that, you've got to do some qualifying events to get there. And so the Yukon was one of the qualifying events. And then you've got to do their 350 miles as a qualifier to prove that you can exist in the middle of nowhere in the middle of winter on your own. Like, it's a survival test. You just have to prove that you have the skills to survive in that environment. And then they let you do the full 1,000 miles, because after the 350-mile mark ends, and it's just as you go, when I say just, probably 100 miles into the interior, once you cross the Alaskan range, and there's nothing, like, it's just barren. But at this village, there's literally nothing for 700 miles. So that's the point where the 350-mile ends, and then you do that and you qualify and come back. So when I was doing the 350-mile, when I was going over the Alaskan range, there was quite a significant blizzard. So we're going up, and there's 2 of us at this point in time, because every now and then you will travel with another member of the race. And you're not really racing, so you're not being competitive with each other. And we sort of were at this homestead where you can enjoy a nice big lunch. So there was a young couple there who lived there, so they'd put on lunch. They had a cabin where you could sleep and that sort of thing. So had a bit of rest, a bit of food. And we knew that it was really exposed up until we get over the pass and then down the other side of this range. And there's a blizzard coming in. So we decided to leave together. I was hoping at about midnight I'd go over the pass, just get on the other side, and then I could have a sleep where it was sheltered and outside of the wind. But as we were getting up there, the blizzard created a full whiteout. Couldn't see the trail that we were walking on. There was a fork in the trail that we weren't aware of and that we missed because it was completely blown over with snow. And we kept walking up the trail that we could kind of make out. And we eventually worked out that we were lost. Not lost, we were just on the wrong trail. But it took us a couple of hours, and then there was all this like, oh, maybe it is the right one. If we keep going, it's going to bend around. I don't want to have to go back. And you're in this indecision about, because you don't want to take one step more than you need to, essentially. So we get to a point where it was like, no, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to keep going up. And there was another pass, another 20 miles up the valley or something. So we went back. We had a bit of fortune is that some buffalo hunters had come up on a snow machine and actually driven the way that they needed to go. So by the time we got back there, it had been marked from that point. So we got back on the trail, and by this time the blizzard had ended. And it was around about 3 a.m. by this time, so it burnt a lot of time trying to work out where we were. And then when I was sort of walking, and I was probably the most fatigued I've ever been. So I was sort of walking from bend to bend. I'd see a tree 50 meters ahead, and I thought I'll just walk to that tree and then rest. So I'm resting every 50 meters. My mind is just screaming at me to go to sleep. Like I'm completely out of energy. The dude I was with has started doing what they call shivvy bivvering, where you just stop, lay down on the snow. When you get cold enough, you wake up, and thought, I don't know about that. I'll just keep walking. And so it worked for him. He wasn't moving any faster than me, so it didn't really do much for him. But eventually we got to, and the hills as we were going there, we had these really steep inclines just before we got to the pass. And I remember I'd walk 10 meters and I'd have to rest, walk 10 meters. And it just felt like this massive hill. Then I'd go over, and then there's another one. And I just got really negative in my own mind that like these things are never going to end. I'm never going to get there. I just want to go to sleep. Eventually got to the top of the pass, and the sun started coming up. And you kind of get that feeling of relief that, okay, that's done. Now it's all downhill. It was still too windy. It was too barren on the other side to rest anywhere. So I decided the sun's up now. I'm just going to go down. And the next checkpoint was, I think, 35 Ks away. So I ended up walking down, got to that about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Despite the fact that I thought I was like so tired or extremely fatigued or unable to go on, once the sun came up and I had a little bit of something to eat, I felt fine, and I was able to walk another 35 miles without issue. And then I had a little bit of sleep there, and then went on, I was fine. And I sort of came to the realization, or kind of reinforced the idea that fatigue is just perceptual. So I hadn't gotten any extra energy from anywhere. It was just the fact that, and the sun has a really amazing effect for anyone that's kind of worked through the night and felt the sun in the morning, you do get that burst of energy. And there's a whole heap of actual mechanisms related around the sun, and that's why people talk about daylight or sunlight a lot. And if you're doing shift work, the importance of trying to avoid that sun if you're on your way home to go to sleep, because it completely destroys what you thought was going to be a good sleep. So there was that, but then my perception around fatigue had changed as soon as the sun came up, a little bit of something to eat. So I was able to walk another, 7, 8 hours or whatever it was without an issue. I was tired. I'm not going to deny that. And I had a good sleep when I got there. And we had a bratwurst, which is probably the best bratwurst I've ever had in my life. So it was like, all right, I wasn't fatigued. I just needed to stop and rest. That's all it was. So the energy was there. My body just didn't want to tap into it. It just wanted to recover. So I sort of changed my thinking around it, but how you tap into that when you need to, I don't know. Like that's still the big question. Like some people can tap deeper into their energy reserves than other people, and there's some research that looks at perception of effort, which is kind of where I went on. Masters of research was looking at the biopsychological or psychobiological model of fatigue, which looks around that perception. So it's this constant updating of how much you've used, how much you've got, how much harder the activity is going to be, how much more you're going to need, and then trying to balance your output against that.
And obviously that's like an automated system or response that's happening constantly.
So yeah, you don't run out of energy, because you never really, except for the heat. Heat's the only anomaly, but you never really see people work themselves to death. Like in the heat, it's different, because by the time you realise that you're cooked, it's too late. So there's always that reserve. There's always that control mechanism within your brain. And this is all theoretical, but it makes pretty good sense when you look at it. But how do you increase that? So you can increase it, or there has been a research project on it, but it's a really laborious way of doing it, and no one's ever going to do it. So it does come down to thinking. But then when I went back, I thought, all right, I'm going to see how big these hills were at the end, because my thinking was that they weren't going to be that big. And there's an actual term for it. is that when you're fatigued, it changes the perception of how you see things within your environment, so that things seem worse than what they are, and that's essentially your brain trying to get you to avoid doing hard things. So I get up there, and this time I went up, I was making much better time when I went back to do the 1,000-mile, and I was actually made the homestead, or this little homestead thing at night. So I slept there, got up first thing in the morning, so I was able to start walking up towards the pass during the day. So when I got up there, it was sort of mid-afternoon, and it was literally almost flat. And I just started laughing to myself, like I was that fatigued, and it had that much an impact on my perception, is that my brain had literally fabricated how large these climbs were, but I felt that fatigue physically. Like it had a physical manifestation on me, which is just the mechanism of trying to get me to stop and rest there.
Just a protection, a self-protection.
Yeah, but again, like none of it was real. As soon as the sun came up, I was fine. So like for me, it was a really fascinating way of looking at it, or understanding, because some of the stuff I was looking at within the research as well. So it was like, oh, this has a really big impact on you. And it kind of changed some of my perception about how much energy, or how you kind of deal with things when you're tired, or that sort of thing. So you're going to feel tired. You're going to need that rest at some point. But it's like, all right, I'm tired. I've still got plenty of energy. So when there's nothing to be worried about. I'm just tired. Like all I need to do is just either one, have a bit of a break, have a bit of food, kind of just rest for a little bit, get going, just manage it. But I'm not in a critical situation here. Like I can keep going at this rate for a long time.
Yeah, it's up here in the melon. It's also whatever that system is telling you to stop.
Yeah.
So I guess straight away, I think, is that speak to the importance of actually resting and making sure that you're recovering your energy stores and fatigue and all that sort of stuff. But then also, like you said, managing it through smaller breaks to then, I guess, reset that system potentially.
Yeah, so you got to be able to manage. You've got to manage your energy output, essentially. You want to be as efficient as you can. But it also comes back to that point about the mental side of things, or the decision making. Because when I was walking up that hill and those gradients seemed like really high inclines, my decision making about that is, I can go 5 meters and I need to rest. And like that's having a physical manifestation in me. So like the visual change from that is that they look like that, or look really high, and then when I get there in the daylight and I'm in really good condition, like it's literally flat, and I'm looking at it going, just as a visual perception, like my eyes are playing tricks on me essentially about how it is. And then when you look at that back to, and this is kind of something that I sort of would talk a bit about the police work that I was doing, or not police work, but the training within police, is that, and this would be very similar in any environment where you're doing shift work, or you're doing really extended hours, is that when people are really tired, they're not seeing what's going on. Like their visual accuracy is impaired. So, and this is when you look at some of the neuroscience stuff, is that there's more pathways leading from, so the occipital lobe is where all the visual stuff is processed. There's more pathways leading out than there is in. So the traditional theory is that information came in and we just processed it essentially like a camera. Comes through our eyes, goes to the occipital lobe, or through a few different cortices, and we process that, and then that's where we get perception from. But now there's a really interesting theory out there that looks at this and goes, we're making a prediction of what's going on based on our experience. And then that prediction is updated as information, or prediction error. So we sort of predict, okay, this is what's going on. We're looking for the information to support that, or we see an error, so we update a little bit. And information doesn't get updated if there's no need to. So that's a lot to do with expectation and experience. So what we see theoretically under this sort of the emerging theory is that the environment is based around what we expect to see within it. So if we're really tired and your mind's got control of your prediction to a degree, then people are going to look bigger than what they are. They're going to look more threatening. Things are going to look worse than what they are. So when we're really tired, we go into more of avoidance. So we're less likely to make decisions around taking action, and more likely to make decisions around sort of inertia or kind of avoidance. And it has a really big impact. But those people are making decisions based on what they legitimately think is going on. But that's not necessarily what somebody who has just gotten out of bed is seeing, or a video camera or something like that. Like when you look at something through a different lens, you go, okay, well, this is what I'm saying. It's like, well, that's not what I seen at the time. And they're not making it up. That's exactly how they processed what was going on.
That's it's super interesting. And then especially when you think about, working in a team and the different members within that team having different levels of fatigue and different levels of perception as well.
Yeah.
Because you're making the decision and then the other person is going, what are you doing?
Yeah, but they can act as some of your sort of decision tools for it. So you can have things that can assist you with your decision. So if you're really tired, you're looking at something and somebody else is in a different state and they see something that you're not seeing, then they can give you that information. So now you're improving your perception or your understanding. And that's where you kind of get group situation awareness, because essentially you can only ever make a decision based on the information that you have access to or the way you perceive that information. Like firstly, you've got to be looking in the right direction to actually see it. Then you've got to be attending to it, because you can be looking at something and not see the critical information. And there's a whole heap of stuff around inattentional blindness and these sort of things, is that you can look at something and completely miss the most important information. Then you've got to recognize what it means and be perceiving it accurately. And then you make a decision on the back of that, where you're kind of forecasting anyway what you've done from previous experience, what the best solution is. So if you've never seen it, you've never tried to resolve that situation, you've got no experience to draw from anyway. So you're just making a best guess. And what seems to be the case is that you may subconsciously think 2 or 3 options come to mind, and then you will choose the highest probability action and take that and do that behavior to try and get the outcome. So there's a whole heap going on within it, but
seconds.
Yeah, it happens really quick. And a lot of it is just responsive based on what you've previously done. And this is where my PhD research really looked at, was in the military, in kind of close quarter combat, where things are happening really, really quick and there's not much time. You enter a room, like you have no time. Well, you've got the rest of your life essentially, which might not be long, to respond. So a lot of that is actually a response based on the training. So whatever's done in training, you're likely to see in that situation. So I don't think people are making a conscious decision.
It's almost like a default.
Yeah, it's almost a pre-conscious response. And so whatever's happened in the training environment, you're likely to see there, but it's very much overdriven or overrun by the need for survival. So you're going to see a lot more action. So there's definitely a response bias, or highly likely that there's a response bias for action. Because if you take action now and that threat's gone, then it's not a problem. The issue is that you got to make sure you're perceiving the right information to inhibit that response. So a lot of it is around inhibition within that sort of like real time constrained environments. Is that if you don't pick up the information that tells you need to inhibit a response, then you're likely to go through that action. And that's something I did see in the research, because a lot of the environments will use safety equipment for both friend and foe. And people are picking up on the big things and they're not picking up on the little things. And the little things is what's actually they should be using to discriminate between friend and foe. So you see a lot of sort of fratricide or blue on blue, because they're just missing those things. And then when you put them into an environment where there actually is real consequences, it's only going to get worse.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And especially that perceptual piece as well. So just going back to a point you said, like whatever's done in training is what's done.
Most likely. Like, some people can, it's almost creativity. So some people can go outside of what they've been trained to do and find a solution that they've never had before. But most likely when people are under pressure, they're going to do whatever they've done within their training environment. And when people are and a training environment itself, it's its own kind of unique environment. So a lot of, when we look at tactical operations, it's mostly threat. You're dealing with threats. So whatever that threat is in your domain, that's the threat. And there's always a consequence to it. So most of it is looking to how do I solve the problem related to that threat without it actually causing harm or damage or anything like that. So when you're training, how do you replicate that threat? And that's the real challenge, because when we're talking about, and a lot of the stuff I did is firearms. So you're not really going to get ethical approval or get to a training environment where you can shoot at people. So you can never, you're not going to get people to the level of threat that they think they may not survive that training cycle. You're never going to get there. So you can never cross that bridge or sort of reduce that chasm. You can go a little ways using sort of sim rounds, reality-based training, those sort of things to create a consequence. But but if you've got guys who've been overseas on 6, 7 deployments, come back and shoot a paint round at them, they don't care.
Yep.
So it loses all value.
Yep.
Like, it's just physical pain. They don't care about that. They may care about looking bad in front of their peers, which is a different threat, because that sort of comes under shame, which is more of an internal threat, not an external threat. So you've kind of got internal and external threats. And this is where the training environments traditionally potentially overutilized internal threat and didn't have the right external threat. So you're not even getting your right outcomes, because most of these threats, different threats are kind of processed in different parts of the brain. Like, it all comes down to groups of neurons firing together. So if you get an environment where somebody is yelling and screaming and trying to elicit a stress, which is, it's an old school kind of myth, but it's not effective. That's what they use. So people are just trying to work out, or they're trying to game the training. So they go into an environment, they're getting yelled at, like, all right, what's the response they need to see so they stop yelling at me? And then that's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to get a solution, but the behavior is more around what's not getting yelled at. So they don't get yelled at this time for doing it. So next time they're going to do the same thing, because they're hoping not to get yelled at. Or if they do something, they get yelled at. It's like, fine, I don't do that. But what if that solution is the right solution outside in a specific situation? Because if you want to accelerate adaptive expertise, it's all around kind of the amount of trial and error situations you can put someone through. So it's a whole range of variable situations where they're essentially just going through trial and error. Oh, this didn't work this time. Oh, it'll work in this situation. Okay, so now I know what solution works for these problems. And then they've got all different solutions for all different problems, and they're just going through it. It's like if you give a kid a bike, they'll stack it. They'll learn, okay, if I lean this way too much, I stack to the left. If I lean that way too much, I stack to the right. If I hit the brakes too hard, the front wheel locks up, I go over. They learn the boundaries of performance, and then you put them on a track and they learn, okay, well, this is how I go on cambered corners. This is how I go here. And they learn how to do it. You just let them go with a bit of guidance. Where training environments, like, you may run 2 or 3 scenarios. You've got set things in there that you think they're going to see. They go in there, they see a completely different picture, and then they get yelled at for it. Right? Oh, I didn't know that was your intent. So, like, in your mind, you know what's going on. You did the brief, like, it's perfect. How could they not miss it? But in their mind, they've got no context. So it becomes it's really challenging to get really good training environments that have high transfer. So you've got to try and reduce all the irrelevant stress, because you don't want them worried about internal shit. Like, you don't want them sitting there worrying that they're going to fail, they're going to get back squatted if it's like a recruit style thing. I'm thinking that they're going to get shamed in the meal room if it's like training inside your workplace. So you got to remove that. Okay, that can be difficult.
Very tricky if it's a culturally, it's an ingrained culture.
Yeah, once you got more than 2 people, you got problems. There's a difference between jovial and actual shaming, but shaming comes up as a really big fear. Like, it's a really big threat. So, but you want the contextually relevant threat. So, like, your operational threats. So this is where, and most of the stuff I did was sort of military policing, and mostly around firearms or those sort of things. So that's easy. You give someone, ideally you would shoot paint at people, but again, randomly, some people think that that's too much stress, so they won't do it. You're like, well, it doesn't get any easier operationally. Let's just take that off the table. So if they can't handle training, then you got to question how long they're going to handle it in the operational environment. But you can put that threat there, and then you remove all the other things, and then at least now you've got something for them to kind of work out, okay, how do I deal with that threat? And there's also a component there which kind of comes under the stress vaccination. That term gets used a lot, and I like the idea of vaccination rather than inoculation, because when we look at it from, there's a scientific term called hormesis, where you give somebody a small exposure to a stressor in an appropriate amount, and then that kind of challenges them for a little bit, and then that gives them a higher capacity or increases their threshold to deal with it. And then you continually expose them to progressive or graduated increases in it. So it's like a vaccination, but you're not going to inoculate them against stress.
Yep.
The issue is, and this does come from exposure therapy, and there's some really interesting research around that about how quickly they can get people to overcome like deep phobias. Within 6 months, it's back to where they started. So if there's not a continuation of exposure to that relevant stress,
Regression.
they regress, yeah. So, and then when you look at aviation, I think it's mandated within there that every 3 months they do a high stress critical incident inside a simulator or something like that. Like they have to keep training it. So that 3 months seems to probably be about the point. When you look at a lot of the other stuff from physiology, you start to detrain pretty hard. Like by 3 months, you really detrain depending on what the actual capacity is that you're dealing with. So how do you continually expose people to those sort of worst case operational stresses that they're not encountering throughout their daily work routine every 3 months?
Is that only applicable for those high consequence, high stress scenarios? Is that applicable for like most skills?
It seems to come down to familiarity. So whatever you're dealing with on a daily basis, you get really comfortable with. You know what I mean? Like you look at driving is a really easy example. So you get a learner in there and they're freaking out because they're just not familiar. So the first time I went to drive, you know, I got taken to a car park in the middle of nowhere. There's less chance of crashing into something. You know, he's open space. I actually drove in paddocks before that, but to drive on the road. And you're kind of nervous, and then you go out and you're sort of progressively exposed to traffic. And then now you've got this, back then there was no real requirements of X amount of hours in these conditions, those sort of things. But that's exactly the same principle, is that now you have to do so many hours driving in traffic, in the wet, on freeways or whatever it is. So you're building your tolerance and experience so that when you're on your own, you can solve those problems. And then after a while, people are watching Netflix, driving down the road, eating a burger. You know what I mean? Like they're just so familiar with driving and they're picking up the cues all around them. Most people are picking up those cues really well. Like it all comes back to attention, let's be honest though. The more attention you're paying, the better. But they're really familiar with it. But then when someone flies across the lane in front of them, they don't know how to respond. So the things that you're dealing with on a routine basis, I don't think you need to train it. It's always good to review where you can because you always want to try and improve. But again, it comes down to how good you are at your review process because, again, you don't want that turning into public shaming. It's about development, you know, and depending on the environment, what that looks like. But you always want to keep improving and people don't always have the time for that. Like if they're really drained at the end of a big shift, people aren't going to sit around and have a hard discussion for 30 minutes. They're just going to want to get home. So there's that. But then the actual training you do outside of that should be those, like you said, those cases which are probably low probability, but really high consequence, where they're really complex. So that the first time they go in and see something isn't the first time they've seen it live. Like you don't want somebody turning up to something where it's sort of chaotic and they've got no idea of where to start. Because even when you look at sort of complex adaptive systems, and I'll sort of define the chaos complex thing a little bit, and there's a number of different models out there. So you've got like the simple environment, the complicated environment, then complex, and then chaos. So most of what people do within sort of first response is in complexity.
Yep.
But people don't call that a first responder till it's breached complexity into chaos. So when people look at complexity, what's going on is emergent. So it changes based on whatever changes within that environment. So if a factor changes, whatever's happening at that time or that emergent property changes. And then in chaos, it's just the Wild West. Like you've no idea. You turn up, you don't know all the factors, you don't know which one to actually try and influence first to change. Because as soon as you add or take something away from it, what's going on changes.
Yep.
So you've got to try and work that out really quickly. But in chaos, you have to act really fast because it just gets worse. Like chaos never really seems to resolve itself. Like standing around, things usually don't get better. So most first responders will turn up in that chaos. So now, if it's something that they've never seen, firstly they have real hard time trying to identify what it is that they need to intervene with first, what that behaviour looks like, and it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen. And within sort of complexity and chaos, it's really difficult to predict outcomes or predict what something's going to do to affect it. And there's usually low agreement as to what you do and how that's going to work. Everyone's have a different idea based on their different perception of what's going on, their different experience, these sort of things. And if no one's ever seen it, then you just stand around with a heap of people like, holy shit, how do we solve this? But you've got to start acting.
What influence does like the stress level have on that decision making? So if you rock up into that environment, complex, chaotic, it's somewhere in there, and you haven't had that stress vaccination, So what does that look like for someone who hasn't had any of it versus someone who, say, had a high level of stress vaccination to that environment?
Yeah, so someone's really familiar with solving chaos, and some people are more comfortable in chaos than others. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I was overseas is that, like, when you're in conflict with another group of people, it's chaotic. Like, it's really chaotic. But some people, over time, people almost get a level of comfort with that chaos, and you can start to work out, okay, I can't impact anything they're doing at all, or essentially. So I've just got to focus on my tasks. So, and this is a really big thing when we're under stress, is that you become really preoccupied with the threat. The threat's there. Like, once you've identified the threat, and if you've identified what it means to you, then, like, you don't need to spend a lot more time on it. So you have to come back to the task. So what is the actual task, and what do I need to do to fulfill that task? So, and there is a constant kind of perceptual attention between the threats or the challenges within the environment and then your task or your motivation. So when you turn up to something, you're trying to achieve a certain outcome. So when you get there, you're looking for the things within the environment that you need to overcome to get that solution. So if you're under a lot of stress, or you essentially breach your capacity, and everyone has a different threshold. So one person can stand there quite calm, and the next person can be standing there like freaking out, just full of sweats, those sort of things, going through that whole range of physiological changes. Okay, but the threat's the same to both. The threat is the same, it's just their perception of it is different. Yeah, so you're constantly going back and forth between, okay, that's the threat, this is my task, this is the action to get over that threat. And if you're functioning really well, then you'll sort of prioritize how you're going to solve them in order, these sort of things, based on experience, those sort of things. So that's what you want to do. And then you actually need a certain level of threat response or physiological change. So it's just physiological arousal or physiological upregulation is essentially all it is. It just gets called stress. I'd use the term threat a lot because I came from environments where it was a threat. There's actually a sweet spot where once that increases to a certain level, then everything gets better. So the threat response is physiological response to threat or stress. So the difference there being a threat is a physical thing within the environment you'll deal with. Stress is the way you're dealing with it.
Yeah,
essentially. So there could be nothing there, but you can still stress or have anxiety because something might be there. So anxiety I look at is a future threat or a threat in the near future. So if you're driving, I don't know what you call lights and sirens in fire brigade. I don't know.
Yeah, turning out.
Yeah. So you're driving out to something, everyone's going to have an increase in anxiety because they don't know what that problem is, or how bad that problem is going to be. It's difficult to predict what you're going to see and how you're going to do it. If it's something that you've been to a number of times and it's all the same information, there's probably not much of a response because, all right, sweet, I know what's going on here, or I've got a pretty good idea. But you need that because that increases the way you use energy, increases the actual processing speed. That improves, I think, between 10 to 20%. So how fast you can process information. And there's always individual fluctuations in this stuff. How long you maintain your efficiency for, your ability to accurately identify things. Everything gets better. Everything.
That's if you're in that sweet spot.
You're in the sweet spot. Once you breach that, everything gets worse. And rapidly. So there's two theories on it. There's one where it's sort of the Yerkes and Dodson inverted U, so the decrease looks the same as the increase. And then there's catastrophe theory where you just fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
I don't think either model fits everything perfectly. I think it depends, like a lot of things, but when it's really high consequence, I think it looks more like falling off the cliff. People just cease to function.
Yep.
Like they just have real problems. They focus on the threat too much. They get into that sort of perceptual distortion where the threat looks a lot worse than what it is. And it's almost like a fight or flight behavior. So a part of that is orienting. So when you get to something, you're orienting initially to work out, what does this mean? What information do I need to look at? What does that mean to me? What are my options? You're just trying to work it out so you don't miss anything that's really important that you need to know about before you commit into it. The problem is a lot of emergency response is that you're committed before you have all that information.
Yeah.
So now, and this is one of the things that you see in training, is that training is often set up to fight your way out of a problem. So very rarely do we look at the information, what they call left of bang. So all the preceding information that I should have been analysing before I actually got there, because there's some excellent research out there from a number of different studies that show performance actually starts well before the event. almost like people are picking up all the right information early, and they're actually well into their response before an amateur has actually understood what's going on. So like it's literally how you're utilizing that time before you're committed to the critical event. And even some of the stuff that I sort of have seen operationally is things were missed pre-stimulus, which would have changed the whole outcome.
Right.
Like they've got to a point where they're committed. Their response is fine. It's just it may have happened differently if they had have seen information differently.
Does that come back to like potentially that in that left of bang gathering that information is, that regulation piece and managing where you are on that inverted U or whatever to essentially make sure you're receiving and retaining the right information.
So you want to stay in that zone. So as you're heading out and you get an increase in anxiety, that's good. That's not a bad thing. So, and one of my big things that I have in general is people need to stop saying that stress is bad. Like most of the stuff that looks around at stress comes from the mindset that stress is debilitating. Where there's a whole other range of research that looks at it that stress is actually required for growth. And the outcomes, everything is better over here. So the people that look at stress is like it's an essential requirement for growth as long as I can maintain it long-term and chronically, it's fine. Like there's going to be periods where you're going to breach your capacity to deal with it and when you need more resourcing. But that's why you have groups of people around. That's why you have all these other resources, is that at some point, everyone's going to have to dip into those resources. Where the people that look at it and go, oh, stress is debilitating, like all their outcomes are worse. Everything. Like there's no metric that even compares between the two of them. Like even they're like blood sampling, all that, just from the mindset plays a role. But there's like that probably influences perception, behavior, the way that they recover and utilize things, a whole heap of things that are probably involved in that. But if you can maintain, so a big piece is maintaining your regulation under stress is to understand that, or under that anxiety, is that it's fine. It's actually meant to happen. Feeling nervous on the way to a job is actually pretty normal. And I would challenge anybody to say that they didn't, especially in your first year, like everything freaks you out. So it's regulating that, because then when you get there, you can look for the right information. You're going to perceive it quite accurately. You're going to have a pretty good mental model or an understanding of what's going on. All your other senses are working really well. So you're going to hear what people are saying. Communication is a massive thing. So you're going to understand that. You're going to understand what it means to you. You're going to provide clear communication about what you're saying, this sort of thing. So you're going to function really well. So if you've got everyone who has got to that sweet spot and they're regulating it really well, you're going to have a high-performing team, essentially. And then you're going to be, between everyone in that group, you'll have the response. Like you'll have a variation of experiences, a variation in prior experiences before they got to the job. These are things. And this is where diversity, like cognitive diversity, works really well, is everyone will see it slightly different, be able to offer up a different type of solution. And within that, you'll have what you want. If people aren't regulating, then when they turn up, like they're not going to hear things that are really important. They're going to misperceive things. They're not going to be looking in the right direction. The responses are going to could be really random.
So many flawed senses.
Yeah, they're more likely to be avoidance based and these sort of things. And this kind of, like at the coal face, it's about the physical threat. Then when you start to move up through leadership, then it becomes around career threats. Like you'll see people in leadership positions who'll go into an environment, and the big threat there is, especially if you're talking about multi-agency, is like people are trying to be dominant characters. You've got threats from other agencies. You've got career threats. You've got these sort of things. And the same thing plays out, is that the way they're perceiving information, what they attend to changes. So people almost will go for something that, all right, if I can control this one thing, then that gives them a little bit of a feeling of certainty that they can control all the other things. But if that one thing's irrelevant, like nothing changes.
Yeah. And is that into that leadership sphere? Is that where it changes from a threat into the stress?
Yeah, that's more stress.
And it's like that's, for want of a better word, perceptual.
Yeah, there's still career risk in a lot of that. Like, and this is one of the things that doesn't help. Like, if you look at a lot of and we'll call them disasters that have happened around the world, sort of thing, they're always analysed really critically, and everyone's always an expert on it. And oh no, it happened because they didn't do this or they didn't do that. It's like, how do you know what information they had access to at that point in time? Like, there's heaps of information available afterwards. So
Monday morning quarterbacks.
yeah. But people lose their jobs over it. Yeah. Like, especially in the media. Like, if the media get hold of something and that's what they want the narrative to be, it's really difficult to change that. So, and that is a legitimate threat. Like, you hear people talk about, don't do anything that's going to put you in the paper on Monday. and these sort of things. Like, you could respond really well, but if it's perceived poorly, then that can be a career ender. So it becomes really difficult. So you can kind of, for me, I can see why people are often reluctant to take action or make a really strong call on something. But in chaos, you need that action. Like, it's not getting better on its own. Like, it's just deteriorating. So it becomes really difficult. So
so it's a bias towards action essentially when you're faced with a threat or a hazard that's emerging, and you need to deal
this
with
is in a really short time frame. So if it's immediate survival instinct, it's essentially, you will see a tendency. You can't always be certain about anything that's going to happen, and this is the thing, is that you're more likely to see a bias towards action if it's a survival thing, if that action is going to allow them to survive.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, but when you've got things that are playing out a little bit longer, so sort of, and this is theoretical, is that the further you move up in your sort of hierarchy, the more time you have for decisions. Right? And it's still not always a lot.
Yep.
But that means you can analyze information a little bit better. So for somebody who jumps out of a car and the threat's right there, it's almost responsive. Like, it's a stimulus response, or they make a choice between two options based on what they've done previously. Very rarely will they do something they've never done, unless they've seen it done, or it almost has to be in there somewhere. And this is where, like, virtual training, desktop training, discussions, talking to other people and kind of learning from what they've done, these sort of things can actually implant an idea that you can later act on.
Right. So you don't necessarily have to do it.
No, it looks better if you have done it. That's for sure. But we learn through story. Like, and this is how people have traditionally learned for hundreds of years. Like, just say we go back 300 years and I say, all right, that thing that winds on the ground and moves along that looks like a stick, don't touch it. And you go, okay, sweet, I learned not to touch it. Or if you see it, grab it at the tail. Next time you see it, like, at the tail. So you can learn from other people's stories. And the better the story and the more visceral, the more you're likely to learn it. So that's essentially how we've told stories for a long time, is that people just, and it was mostly how to survive your environment. So you don't get eaten, don't eat poison berries, all these sort of things. It's story. So that's how people learn the best. So we can learn through that. And that's why case studies and all those sort of things are really good. And when you look at video, it's just a story, essentially. So people learn from that as well. So that's kind of, it is one method to do it. But if you actually go out and enact it, obviously it's going to look a lot better. But if you're short on time, then it's certainly one way of doing it.
But it's not a complete solution. Like, is the hierarchy of, like, what, let's just say, like, optimal training is going out and enacting it. And somewhere in that hierarchy, lower down the list.
But some things may only be a desktop scenario. So there are some things where you're not going to go set fire to a high rise, or like the logistics of running like multi-agency scenarios and getting the right people, because everyone's always too busy to do scenarios or to do these sort of things. Until it happens, and then everyone wishes that they had have attended. So essentially that's all they are, is you get a desktop scenario where they're just enacting a story, but it gives them something to work from. So the more realistic that is, the better it's going to be. So there's some things where it's probably going to be really difficult to go out and physically do it. And when you're at the coalface, it's generally a lot easier to do it because there's less resources. You've got the people right there, you can commit the time.
Yep.
The higher you go up, you need more people from different areas. It just becomes a logistical issue. I'm trying to get everyone together, but it is essential. Like, because if you get a really big disaster, and there's no reason why we couldn't, whether it's environmental, whether it's terrorist, whether it doesn't matter what it is. You see randomly planes seem to be falling out of the sky with a bit of regularity at the moment. It could be anything. Like, if one of them falls into a high density suburban area, then that's a massive event. So now you've got all these people streaming onto something that they've never rehearsed for. So it's going to look really ugly, and the review is not going to be very pretty. But they're going to do, most people are going to do the best they can with what they have at the time.
On that, you just mentioned the word review. What role does like effective feedback and review processes play in how we learn and how we adapt to, like, future incidents?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an integral component. I think it depends on the situation as to what the review looks like. And I've had a bit of a look through, and by no means would I say it's a thorough look. Just been looking through different research to see how different people are doing it, what seems to be effective. I can't find anything conclusive.
Right.
So some agencies do it or seem to do it quite well, others not so much. So I know fast jet fighters do it quite well, but it's very resource intensive and it goes for a very long time. So they're very critical. They've got a lot of data points that they can use as well to try to reduce the amount of, opinion and perception that comes in. I've sat in ones where it's just turned into arguments everywhere and like no one's actually benefiting from this.
Yep.
And then I've been in ones that have been done really well and a range in between. So it kind of depends on what the review is about. So if it's more skills based or decisions, then that probably looks different from something where you're kind of reviewing individual ones. There's definitely benefit for it, but at an individual level. So if I turn up, respond to a situation, I get a resolution, I come back, I'm going to make sense of what that meant to me. So afterwards, I've got to reconcile whatever happened, whether it's been good, bad, indifferent. I'm going to reconcile that my actions didn't cause any harm, essentially. And if they did, then I've got to try and work out, okay, well, why? Okay. And then I'm going to try and make sense of it. So I'm going to look at, okay, well, it depends on how people go into it, but you don't want to ruminate on it for too long. So if it's negative, you don't want to ruminate because while you're ruminating, you're still under that stress load. So even though you're not there, your body's still responding as though you are. So if you ruminate on it for days, like that's when you get really chronic stress. And some people probably will ruminate on things longer than others. So you got to try and close it off. Like, okay, well, what's the takeaway for me? How do I perform better next time? How do I do this, that sort of thing? And depending on the outcome, how hard or easy that might be. So you'll try and make sense of it. So if you're doing a review process with somebody there who's got really good experience, they can help you with that review process. They say, okay, well, and these days if you've got video and that sort of thing, but bearing that video is not always the same as seeing it, like it shows up different things. So you can't always say, oh, this is exactly what happened. You can use it to go, okay, well, did you see that? It's like, oh, no, I didn't see that. Well, if you didn't see it, you can't make a decision based on it. But next time you've got to try and look for things like this. So you got to try and you can fill in the picture to try and work out what you missed, what you might then need to look at in training. So if you're seeing a trend in things from everybody, maybe it's a training liability. Your training hasn't exposed from it because there's a whole heap of research that's coming out on training scars about how people will learn something from training that only works in training. Yep. And then that actually leads to poor performance operationally. Or you see people do things that it's like, oh, they should never have done that. It's like, well, that's what they're doing in training. Yep. So you can start to highlight some of that stuff and influence training. You can get them to go, okay, as an individual, these are some of the things you need to work on. You can go as far as kind of looking at macro cognition. It's like, okay, well, what were you thinking when you got there? And like, oh, I was just worried about the threat. It's like, oh, sweet. So now we need to do a little bit more work to help you with your regulation. So you can kind of work out where you need to start to focus training, where they need to improve, what that might look like and start to help them, especially if they're younger, as to go through it. And then with groups, you can use it to try and understand the group situation awareness as to whether everyone was seeing the same picture. Because if you've got groups responding from different areas, then are they seeing the same picture? Because if they've all got a different picture, then it's going to take you longer to get them all on the same page, or the solutions that they're coming up with are going to look different. So you can use it for a lot of that stuff. And then it's kind of people will use it for post-incident review if there's been traumatic exposure. And that looks completely different again. There's some really interesting research on what that looks like. I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's almost that doing that too early can be even worse than doing it too late.
Right.
That's a different thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting, especially around, I guess it goes back to that, like perception piece and different people will have different views depending on, like even when the time of arrival at an incident, so to speak, in your different roles, all that sort of stuff plays a bit of a part.
Yeah, but it has to be done maturely and by the right person.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly useful tool that I think is underutilized in a lot of areas. But if you're going to do it wrong, it may be better not to do it at all.
It might be more damaging, might cause more harm than good.
Yeah, because if you pick up people walking away from it thinking that their actions were horrible, everything they did was horrible, and then they're ruminating on the review process because it was just a public beating for everyone involved, then next time they turn up to an event that looks like that, the threat is the review. Like, I'm not getting myself in a position to go through that again, so I'm going to really drag my feet on this until somebody with more rank than me turns up. and they can deal with it.
And I guess it's probably tricky to run like a review process that walks that fine line of like identifying the actions taken without turning it into that public beatdown, because we've also seen people like withholding and not wanting to participate for fear of that. It's a tricky thing to sort of try.
It has to be a really mature environment. Like, it has to be done really well as well, because you also don't want people that are very quick to victimize themselves to try and, steer away from things, that sort of thing. Like, it's, it does come down to having the right environment and the right culture where you do have that kind of safety for people to be honest. And this kind of like, people talk a lot about psychological and psychosocial safety and these sort of things. But a big component of that is within reason, obviously, to be honest with each other. But accountability is another one that sits within that, or that sits with it, that most people tend to leave out of the conversation when it comes to these sort of things. So and some people do underperform, like repetitively underperform. So I know from my time in the military or even in special operations, there was a reasonable percentage of people that shouldn't have been there. Like, probably higher than most people think. So they need to be accountable to the group that, okay, if they're not willing to do the work, if they can't bring themselves up to the level of competency required, then maybe that's not the job for them. Because in 6-man teams, if you've got 1 to 2 people who aren't functioning very well, that creates a real problem. So you have to have that kind of accountability piece. And when I first got there, it was probably too far on the other side, where it was semi-psychologically abusive, where like anything you did wrong got pointed out. So you become really robust to feedback. And for the first few years, I think everything I did was shit. But then you get some people that sort of are a little bit better at giving you feedback. So you want to get the environment where it's facts, it's honest sort of thing. If there is a robust conversation, then that's done within reason. Because you want the facts to come out. You don't want people sort of trying to steer it with opinion, or people kind of putting up shields so that they don't have to confront something that they did wrong, or these sort of things. So you want the facts, and then you want that level of accountability. So if you do need to go and improve something, then you're aware of it. Plus, then you've got somebody helping you with what that process looks like.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to say, okay, you need to get better, but then walking off. Another thing, okay, this is an area you need to improve in. All right, these are the resources that you need, just making sure that that's available. Because for someone to improve, they're going to need assistance.
Yep.
Because if they could do it, they would have done it, essentially. Yep. But again, not everyone's that motivated either. So it does get complex.
Very tricky. And that depends on the person delivering that feedback as well.
Yeah.
Like, if that person's not experienced in that world, or that, so an example would be they've come through a process where their experience level's not great, they haven't been exposed to too much, then they step into that instructor role, and all of a sudden it's almost like a default that they go back to what they only know.
Yep, exactly.
And some of the feedback they provide is very, sometimes one-dimensional.
Yeah, yep.
And then that gets the candidate or the whoever rolled up, because what would you know? And it's that ongoing.
Yeah.
But it's...
But that comes back to almost like, and this is one thing that I've noticed a lot, and this is something that was in the military, something I noticed in policing and these sort of things. So you go into, and I don't know what the fire service does, I'm assuming it's pretty similar. Everyone seems to be very similar with it, is that to be able to be an instructor, you need experience on the job. But it's when you go to schoolhouses or all these instructor things, it's mostly just people with experience on the job who are now trying to teach academic disciplines. It's like, okay, and this happened when I was in the police. You go down there, it's like, okay, I'm not a police officer, so I won't talk about policing specific stuff. Okay, all that sort of thing, that's their domain. I won't. If someone asked me questions about it, I was like, okay, well, there's a sergeant, guys, a sergeant, because I'm not talking about that. I'll talk about things that are within inside my domain. But then you'll see police officers off talking about neuroscience and these other things. Like, when did you do your neuroscience degree? Like, where did you do your motor skill units? Like, they'll go through and do a short instructional period. It's the same when I was in the army. You go through, you do a very, very short instructional period, and now you're off as an instructor. So how do you even know how to impart your knowledge? How do you even know your knowledge is relevant? Like, a lot of what we were doing in Afghanistan worked in Afghanistan, but if you're going to do that now, it's not going to work. Like the environment's completely different. Like we were mostly fighting farmers, untrained people, these sort of things with huge air superiority, with resources everywhere. For a good part of it, we were fighting at night, so we had night vision. They had nothing. Like it's not peer on peer. Like it's not that difficult, which is why it was really safe for us. You go now to somewhere where it is peer on peer, and there's drones and there's all these other things. It's completely different. So if I went and instructed now, it's irrelevant. I'm more likely to get people killed because I don't know what I don't know, essentially, or what I did in training isn't going to work anymore. So it's kind of, okay, well, firstly, is my experience relevant? Okay, do I really understand the principles I'm trying to teach? So if I'm teaching a motor skill, how much do I know about motor skill development, these sort of things? If I'm talking about decision making, do I know what's involved in a decision making, or am I just working off my experience that everything I did must have been good? So if you're not investing in your instructors, then, you know what I mean, like that's a part of the issues. Like what's the investment in there? So how interdisciplinary is your instruction? So do you have people that are helping create curriculum that has a really good evidence-based background from good solid research that people who understand how to read that research have done? You know what I mean, how much input is there, or is it just people that have done the job that now trying to interpret things?
I guess in the lack of that relevant knowledge in that domain, what takes over might be like that hierarchical structure, or instructor to participant. Like I know this because it's what we've always done. It's how we do it, because there's a vacuum of relevant knowledge. And
it happened like even when I was doing the human performance stuff. So, and I was a long way from having really good knowledge in it. Like I'll be straight up there. Like my knowledge, I was still learning, but I was further along that road than a lot of the people I was talking to. But I would get shut down frequently because the person I was talking to had more rank than me. Like, no, that's wrong. It's like, it's not wrong. You just think differently because you got more rank. We're not going to have the conversation. Like what you say is going to happen. But then, like they'll rely on tradition. And a lot of times they're sort of protecting what they did yesterday rather than thinking about how they need to evolve for tomorrow. And there's a really good quote I seen ages ago. It was like, in the military, they're continually learning how to refight the last war, but they're not really changing the way they do things for the next war. And I see a lot of training that it evolved a while ago at a certain point for a specific reason. At some point, the risk of staying the same is outweighed by the risk of change. So people will change because it just gets to a point where they have to. So, or someone will come in who has enough influence to make change and evolve the training. But then at some point they leave and no one really understands what the principles were that changed. And then people cycle through and now it becomes opinion based. And then people are protecting their SME status, so they're not going to be wrong. And you end up with training now that firstly it's 20 years old and the methodologies aren't sound anymore. It's not really current and people don't know why they're doing specific things. They just know that that's how we did it. So instead of a training methodology that's based on principles, they're just doing specific practices because that's exactly how they did it before. And you end up with really poor outcomes or suboptimal outcomes. And I see that a lot.
Fascinating. Mate, I just want to circle back because we sort of went on this fantastic conversation path, but what drove you to start trekking hundreds of miles in freezing fucking countries?
I think that started in conversation. I don't know. To have gone in the military, then gone for special operations, that sort of thing. So there's always been a fascination or a curiosity about what can I achieve? Like, what is my real potential, sort of thing. So I've got to, and it's always hard to really understand because the way I look at what I did then is based on my current thinking. So I can't go back in time to think, okay, what was I thinking 30 years ago? So it's always going to be a little bit difficult. But I know it was always curious about how far or what my limit was, and I've always sort of thought it would be nice to get to the end of my life and look back and go, you know what, I achieved a decent percentage of my potential. I didn't just get to 10, my physical activity peaked out, and then I became obese, sat around mobility scooter and ordered Uber because I was too lazy to cook. So for me, it's always been like that. Okay, well, you're here, enjoy it, do something with it. So within that, I was having a conversation, and it's sort of, I think it started out as a conversation initially with one of the guys overseas, because you do have a huge amount of time sitting around doing nothing. Like most of the time you're overseas is actually boredom. And we were looking through a magazine or something, I think it was, I can't remember what it was, but the Marathon des Sables came up, which is a multi-day race in the Saharan desert that I think is 40 Ks a day for 6 days, and it covers 240 kilometers. And we're talking about how difficult that would be and how good it would, like, how much fun, for lack of a better term. Like, what would that be like? And then I didn't really think much of it because it was in the Saharan desert. It looked difficult to get onto, and I thought, I'm not going to qualify ever to get onto that. And then a couple of years later, there was a company that does a very similar thing that came to Western Australia, and they were doing one in Kununurra. And I thought, well, that's just up the road, essentially. And it was pretty cheap. So I thought, all right, I'm going to go give that one a go. So I went and did that, and it turned out to be a horror event. It was really hot, and the distances really varied because of the terrain. I think out of 200 people, they cooked 120 of them on the first day, so they had withdrawn to go get IV and this sort of thing. It turned into a real survival march for a lot of people. And I finished that, and I thought, all right, don't have to do that again because now I've done it. And I did 100K, but then another guy came in, and this was a deliberate challenge, with a newspaper cutout or an article cutout of the Iditarod, and put it on the desk, goes, oh, bet you can't do that. And I sort of slid it back and I said, all right, I'm not even interested in your shit today, and that's not going to work. And he left it there and walked off, knowing full well that I'd read it at some point. And then I sort of read it later that day, and then I sort of Googled it to see what it was, and then it slowly grew to the point where I had to do it. So to get to do the 1,000-mile, it was, at the time, you had to do, we started to do the qualified and the 1,000-mile, and I just didn't have 2 years where I could commit to it. So I found the Yukon, I did that. And that was about 2013, and then I kind of just left it. And then years later, I had some time after I left the army, and I thought, all right, well, I can revisit the Iditarod thing now. And so then I thought, all right, I'll give it a go. The Yukon was all right. I'll give this a go. And then you find yourself there, and like most of these things, about 3 days in, you're in the middle of frozen wilderness. Like, how the fuck did I get here? What was I thinking? I'll never do this again. But then obviously you come back, you rest, and you're like, all right, what's next?
That wasn't so bad. What's the biggest? The next thing on the.
They can only get so hard. At some point, it becomes too hard. So yeah, I joke about it. It's like, oh, I'm sort of looking to see where my limit lies. But then the joke is, once I find that limit, I'm going to be really upset I found it. Like it's going to be a really difficult place. It's not going to be comfortable.
At what point through that journey or through the process of doing these ultra events and adventure racing events did you start doing your PhD?
So I'd done my sports science degree when I did the one in the Yukon. So that was the 430 mile, or about 750 kilometers, I think it turned out to be. And then I took a break. So I did a master's of strength and conditioning, which is purely coursework. And then a couple years later, I think maybe about 2017, I did my master's of research where I was looking at the sort of integrated cognitive and physiological training, looking at that model of perception, trying to understand, okay, well, perception of fatigue, how do we change that perception so that we can improve performance without actually improving anyone's VO2 or their physical capacity? And there's some really interesting stuff on it. It was then, I think in 2019, I did the qualifier. I was going to do, so that was just as I started my PhD. Then I was going to go back the next year and do the 1,000-mile, but it was COVID, during the COVID era. So they were running a modified race, which I wasn't interested in. So I delayed it for a year until everything reopened, because it's the villages and kinds of the remote regions had just shut shop. So they'd locked themselves up, which you can understand. Like, they have no medical facilities. They don't have anything. So they don't want people coming in with this, COVID disease. Funnily, when I finished the 350 was as it was breaking out. So I'd been in the bush or walking through the wilderness for 10 days. I get to this little homestead, and they were really nice people, let us in, big feeds, had some beers and that sort of thing. So you're sort of relaxing, get back onto the internet again, start looking through your stuff. And here's all these people punching on over toilet roll. Like, what the fuck's happened? Like, I've only been gone 10 days. And you're looking at it, and then I think it had just kind of started spreading when I was leaving, but you don't think anything of it. Like, because you get bird flu, SARS, there's always something that's going to end the world. People are stuck in this perpetual cycle of, we're in an event that's going to cause mass destruction. But yeah, now people are fighting everywhere, and was looking at it and I speak to my wife. I was like, what's going on? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, they're talking about lockdowns. So everyone's freaking out. I was like, oh. And she goes, you're talking about hotel quarantines. And I was like, when's that starting? She goes, pretty soon, you need to get home. So I was like, oh, I'm on the next plane out of here. And because I've been in the frozen wilderness, it kind of dries your throat out a little bit. So I had a bit of a cough. So now I'm coming back through the airports and I'm trying to drink water, milk, whatever I can to try and make sure that my throat's fine. Because I was like, last thing I need to do is start coughing because people will freak out. I find myself tied up in the back in the toilet. So I was like, all right, I get home, minimal fuss.
Yep.
But yeah, so I got home, no lockdown or anything like that. I was fine. But
under the radar, lucky.
But it made me laugh. Like, just turn your phone on and you just see pictures of people punching on for toilet paper.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's no food on the shelf, so why do you need toilet paper anyway? I don't know. People are odd. That comes down to chaos and how people are irrational under fear. Like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it's almost, what people do like is a feeling of certainty. Because if we have a feeling of certainty, then it's going to be okay.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, maybe toilet paper is their certainty. Toilet paper. The world can go to shit and I'm going to be okay.
That's what I need for my certainty is to be able to walk.
But it also shows that when you create enough fear, people will hand that over to somebody else with certainty. So somebody stands there, okay, this is the path out of it. Everyone's like, all right, fine, come and save us. But how often are they actually trying to save you?
But then it's like it's almost set in their DNA, because I remember the last cyclone we had, Alfred.
Yep.
I've just gone up to the local shop because I thought I can't order anything online because I got nothing. I'll just go up, and I went to get mince, and I'm thinking, maybe they haven't got a delivery today, or the meat hadn't come in. And I thought, hang on a minute, I reckon it's just because of the cyclone. I'm going to go down the toilet roll aisle, sure enough, every bit of toilet paper gone. I went, here we go again.
All right.
I've just slipped straight back into COVID.
Yeah. I don't worry because my wife buys it in the really big, 24 thing rolls or whatever it is. So we've always got some for ages.
Yeah.
The probability of us running out at a catastrophic event is, I'll run that risk. But yeah, like that, it creates mass hysteria.
It does.
And Alfred was really interesting. And I was actually working at the disaster centre. So like post PhD, I got a job with the Queensland Police training frontline skills. And then I did a sort of short stint at the end at the disaster centre where they work out there, more so helping out with a strategic command program that they had. So I was in there when Alfred was happening. I was at the point where it's just sitting there and I was like, oh, well, did you just turn up? Just come and blow, flood, whatever you're going to do. And so everyone can move on. But it just sat there for ages. But I remember the same thing, thinking, I got to go down the shops. And I was like, I don't want to go down the shops because straight off, I know what I'm after. It's not going to be there anyway. I can't remember what it was, something trivial, but I thought, all right, I'll entertain myself. I'll go down the shops to see what's going on. Like things like, canned goods, breads, that stuff. I get things that, are going to last or you can put away. But then there's so much random stuff missing. Like, what?
And then when you do find something that you want, like you think, oh, good, they've got X and they've got lots of it. I'm going to get 5 of X because who knows? It'll disappear. You've got to get rid of 5 items that you bought for no reason.
I wanted to get some fishing gear because the shop near me was having a sale and it was still on during that time. And I thought, I'm just going to the fishing shop and get some fishing gear. But they also did gas bottles. And there's like a lineup of 50 people trying to get their gas bottle filled. Yeah. Like, it's just...
I guess probably speaks, like you said, like those fear-driven responses, but also those perceptions of like doing those hard things, referencing your journey through your ultra stuff, how it just keeps, you can, once you've done it, you can deal with it. You know, in that context, like North Queensland, they say cyclones rolling in and they yawn.
Yeah.
You say down here in southeast Queensland, a cyclone's coming and everyone loses their fucking mind.
Yeah, they didn't even call it a cyclone down here. I mean, they just said, oh, it's a bit windy down here.
Yeah.
But yeah, they go through it every year.
Yeah.
Every year, like multiple times a year sort of thing. Like I even had the really big floods up there at the end of last year, beginning of this year. It's always flooding up there at the moment. Like it floods, goes down back with life. Yep. Straight away, like minimal complaining because that's just life for them. And I sort of, like I have a fascination for human potential and performance and just an interest in different things about like the human condition type of thing. So like, I was looking at some data or trying to find some data about and this some of it sort of came from Afghanistan, because you go over there and they have nothing. Like it's a third world country. But they don't care. Like they don't have heart disease. They don't have, most probably because they don't have processed food. But they don't have any of the problems that we've got. Like for what they've got, they seem reasonably happy. Although maybe they're really pissed off. That's why they fight everyone. I don't know. You don't sit down and have big conversations with them. So, but they don't have a lot of the problems. Like they don't have the suicide rates we have. They don't have all these things. And even when you look at childhood trauma, like as kids, they all go through a lot. Like I'm not going to get into it here, but they go through a lot that most people don't hear. Like things here that would be catastrophic. Yet here we've got everything we need, like everything. So we live better now than what a king did, 70 years ago. Access to everything that we need as far as information, all these sort of things. Like we're living in surplus. But we've got all these issues with mental health, all these other things. It's like, well, why? Why, if we've got nothing that we don't, like we're asking for nothing, yet we've got issues. But it's almost because we've got too much. It's too
I was going to say, is it because the challenges of life are becoming less and less and less?
Yeah, like people, I think a lot of it has to do with people don't have anything to be passionate about. So like when you go back real primitive, and a lot of stuff I look at does come back from like primitive evolution stuff, because it does explain a lot of things within people. You got all these countries where they've got legitimate threats. Like life is hard, legitimately hard. Like if you get up, you may not make it to tomorrow. And everyone gets that, and they just keep moving forward based on that. They have really low rates of depression. Maybe they hate things, they're not reporting it. Like I don't think you can just go down to the medical centre and say, I've got some mental health today. So they probably are living with something, but they get on with it anyway. Where here we don't have any threats. And one part of our brain, or one of the parts of the brain that's most developed at birth, is the threat center, or the area that's responsible for identifying threat and vigilance and those sort of things. So it's active from birth. And when you look at the way people from sort of really adverse environments function, is that just grows really big and takes over other real estate. But for people in a normal environment, it continues to grow, but it's always on. It's always looking for something. So people that, and a big part of it is to drive us forward. So a lot of the neurochemicals that we have and a lot of our motivation for 100,000 years has been get out of bed, go find food. You know what I mean? Find shelter, this sort of thing. Survive. Get what you need today so you can survive to tomorrow. And then ideally do it long enough, you get to have a partner and you get to resupply humanity or add your contribution to it. Where now, none of that, we don't need any of that. So there's all these things that are still driving us or motivating us to get up and do something, but people don't have anything to do. They don't have a passion. So they sit there with nothing to do, and they got all these neurochemicals and hormones trying to drive them to do something that they're kind of associating to mental health or something's wrong. And if they just got up and get going, they probably would feel a lot better, because there's nothing to be passionate about.
Nothing to drive them.
Yeah. And so that creates this cycle where now they start with coping behaviors, and then they do get into a problem, and now they have got a problem. So, but when you look at people that have challenges, or even people that have given themselves challenges, and this is one of the things that I'll always do regardless of whether I've got employment or I don't have employment, or like at some point you retire, and people degrade really quickly when they retire, especially if they've been in sort of jobs where they've been in it for a really extended period of time, and there's high belonging and identity is fixated in that job as well. And identity is a whole other issue, I think. So they retire and they degrade really quickly, because they don't have anything to do. So it's this thing of, okay, I need a challenge. What's a challenge that's just outside my comfort zone? That kind of scares me a little bit, but excites me at the same time, because that's what I'll focus on now. And there's always distractions. It's hard not to get distracted by all the shit that goes on. You just got to minimize the impact distractions have on you and try and stay focused on giving yourself a reason to get out of bed and go do something.
Yeah.
And when you've got a really good job and an environment, and you're passionate about something, it's really easy. But how many people legitimately wake up and go, I'm really passionate to go and pursue what this is? So if they don't have a challenge that's worth pursuing, their brain will fixate on something else and most likely see it as a threat. And then you see all these people that are really pissed off about everything.
Just raging, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, if you found something that you liked and you went and did it, you probably wouldn't focus on that problem. And then you realize it's actually not that big a problem, and there's other things that you can go and do.
I guess, like you said, though, there's there's a lot of distractions. Like it's easy to be the opposite to positively focused on whatever it is you're passionate about. It's easy to be negative and be outraged
Yeah.
and voice that outrage. You know, technology is making that easier and easier and more attainable.
Yeah.
And that's easy. It's so much easier to pick that up and
and everything spins that kind of negativity cycle as well.
Yeah.
Like you just turn the news on, it's all about negativity.
Yeah.
Because it attracts people. So because we're drawn to salience or negativity or threat, because that part of our brain is so active. Like it's always looking to make sure there's not something that we're about to walk into or a danger in front of us. So it's trying to identify things early. But if there's no threat, it just keeps coming down the magnitude of threats until it finds something to focus on.
Yeah, right.
And somebody's always telling you that you need to be afraid of something. Like even when you look at advertising, the bulk of advertising will tell you why you're a piece of shit. And if you go and get their thing, you'll be less of a piece of shit.
Yeah, try.
Like, start paying attention to it. Like you look at it and you go, this is horrible.
They're just trying to like scare you into buying their
Yeah, like just because that's what gets your attention.
But that part of the brain that is scanning for threat or hazard or whatever, that I imagine that would be advantageous to working in a tactical role.
Oh, definitely.
You know, so obviously we need to support that or utilize that part of our brain.
Yep.
But not to the extent that we're going down.
One of the risks with it, so this comes back, I guess, to the training and those sort of things, is that you want it to be able to identify actual threats efficiently. But if you're in and this goes with any occupation where they're constantly looking for problems. So there's occupations out there where their whole job is to find problems. Yeah. And those people become really good at finding problems, because one of the things that happens with the brain is that it comes down to real estate. So different areas of the brain will grow, but in order to grow, they have to take away something else. Like there's X amount of space in the brain that's all filled. Like the idea that we only use 10% of our brain is a fallacy from a long time ago. Like you're using everything. A lot of it is there for other purposes and like passing signals, but you're using everything. So that area that identifies threat, if you're doing it all the time, it's going to want to grow, so it gets better at it. And a classic example that gets cited a lot within the research is the London cabbies. So there's some research, and this happens to anyone that does anything. They get really good at it, but to get good at it, that part of the brain's got to grow. So the part of the brain that's responsible for memory associated with sort of streets and memorizing this is back before GPS, when they had the old Refidex or the street directory. So they would have to memorize that and they would get tested. They get in a cab. You've probably seen the research on it. It gets cited a lot. That area of the brain grows and it starts taking over other areas. But when it grows, it becomes really active and it becomes really efficient. So if your job is to identify threats, that part of your brain starts to take more and more function. So it's on more and more often, and you become really good at identifying threats. And the problem is that it will go down the scale. So if all it does for 10 hours of a day is identify threats, are you going to turn it off? So when you go home, it's not identifying threats. Or when you go out into a social setting, it's not identifying threats.
Can we do that? Is there ways that we can like counteract?
Switch off?
Yeah, or support both things, because obviously, like you said, you want to be able to do that in your role, but not when you go home. So can we have that that balance and support both?
You can, and there's a different ways of doing it. And this is the thing with interventions. So like I've looked at a lot of the health and wellness stuff, and there's a reason why it's not working. Like it's not that specific things don't work, the approach is not working. Like if you look at most things, like we've been doing things for over a decade now in the health and wellness space, but everything's getting worse. Like as a society, we're not all of a sudden functioning better despite the fact that we're doing all these things. And there's a whole heap of reasons for it. But different things work for different people. So we could have someone come in here with 5 or 6 different strategies to kind of down-regulate or sort of decompress after a day's work. I might like one of them. It works for me. You might like 3, you might like all 6. So saying this is a tool everyone has to use does not work. Yep. And a lot of them have a small effect size when you're looking at a large group, because some people don't respond at all. Some people respond really well, and we look at the average. Yep. So it has to be a really individual approach. So I have to say there's a whole heap of things out there. Don't let Instagram or TikTok or social media tell you which one you need. Yep. Try them. if yoga's your thing, go do yoga. If meditation and breathing's your thing, go do that. And each of them has really good science on themselves. So they all work. And a lot of it also comes down to if you like it, because if you like it, it's going to make you feel better anyway. You're going to enjoy doing it. And enjoyment is a massive part of it. If golf's your thing, go do that. If, throwing rocks and skimming off the surface is your thing, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yep.
If you've got a thing, go do it. So I used to, when I was in Perth, I don't know if you've been there, but the base is situated on the coast, and I used to live more or less on the coast, about 15 kilometres away. So I'd ride to work along the coastal bike path, a really good coastal bike path. So you'd be riding down there, ocean on one side, a bit of bush on the other side, riding home, and the sunsets of an evening over there. So you'd be riding home and the sun's sort of coming down. So it's just really nice. So for me, that was like the third space where I decompress. So I'd get on my bike, and exercise works really well as a way to decompress, as long as you're not going out. And again, the different types of exercise works differently, but people just need to remember that it is a stress load. So when you're looking at the total load that people are taking over the day, it's a load. So you have to make sure that other things aren't being sacrificed around it. You can't just keep, and it comes under anyone that's interested in sort of allostatic load. You can't keep compounding different loads because it's the total load that has the impact, not just one specific thing.
So does that ring true also, like you said, exercise, but also things that are shifting, affecting us physiologically, like sauna, ice bath, things like that? Do they all add to our allostatic load?
They do. But again, if you enjoy the ice bath and it makes you feel better, do it. And I've read a little bit of research on it. I like saunas, but it's a load. Like you get in there, it's not comfortable.
Yep.
I do it because the amount of arthritis and joint degeneration that I've experienced over the years. When I have access to a sauna regularly, it just allows me to keep training and feel better. The cold I enjoy as well, sort of thing. I just have less access to it at the moment. But the science on that's pretty good. People always talk about, it does this and that. And it does half the shit that people recommend. If it shows up a benefit, no matter how small it is in the research, people take it and use it for marketing or whatever. So I wouldn't be too interested in what they're trying to sell. Some people don't like it. But what it does show, and this is probably more so the eye stuff that I've seen, is that because traditionally in sport, it's been used for post-contact essentially. So reduce inflammation. So they use it a lot around recovery after training, but anytime you've done strength work, you're after inflammation. So it actually can inhibit the benefits of strength work. But then I've seen some stuff saying that your body adapts to it over time, but I don't know how good that research is. Or what's the driving force behind it. Probably an ice bath company made that research. So, or maybe you do. You do seem to adapt to things really well. But this is the other problem, is that if you're doing it regularly, your body adapts to it. So each time you do something, it loses its benefit. And this is like when we're talking about caffeine, medications, all these sort of things, is that your body learns to tolerate. So your body, anytime you take it away from homeostasis, it will return to it, but it works out how to reduce the amount of impact it has every time you do something. That's how fitness works. So if I go for a 5K run, it has a huge drain on my energy, efficiency, muscle physiology, all these sort of things. So my body works out, okay, how do we make that 5Ks easier next time? So it increases my aerobic capacity. It increases my blood capacity so I can carry more oxygen. There's a positive response to it. So if I keep doing it, it makes it as easy as it can, so it has less impact on me. So the same thing happens with all these things, is that when you're exposing yourself to an external stimulus, is that your body's trying to work out, how do I reduce the impact? So if you're doing it too regularly, after a while, it loses its effect. Also seen some stuff that the fitter you are, the less impact it has.
Yep.
And that it's more effective on off-training days than when you're doing training days, because again, it's another load.
Yep.
So they're considerations, but if people get in there and it makes them feel good and they love it, get in there.
Yep.
So that's the kind of thing I look at, is that there's all of these things. There's always someone peddling something, like the snake oil salesperson is now just all over the internet. They're always peddling something. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. If it's not going to create a negative consequence or have a negative impact, and it's not going to put you too much out of pocket, then give it a go.
Just give it a go and see how it feels.
Have an open mind to it. If you don't think it's going to work before you even get into it, chances are it's not going to work, because similar to placebo, there's a nocebo effect where, and like I said before with prediction, is that our outcomes are very much dependent on our expectation. So if we go and we go, oh no, that's not going to do anything for me, chances are,
Whatever you believe, if you believe it's crap, but if you have an open mind and go, this
Yeah.
could, this is what could come of it. You never know. Getting back to that part of the brain that is wired for identifying threats and hazard, and then we need that for our job roles and types. So the point is that we should be doing something.
Yeah. Like
Whatever it is.
It's never going to go away, so I wouldn't be worried that it's not going to be on. Like it's always going to be on.
Yeah.
But there's enough issues in life anyway to keep it active. Like you don't need to go looking for things, but you want to try and direct your attention on a task. So like when I spoke before about the attention stuff, is that it's constantly going back between obstacles or things that are getting away of our motivation and our task. If there's no task there, then it's only focusing on threat. And that threat's going to keep coming down. So like, okay, if I've got food, yep. Is there a danger to my life? Yep. Is there, then it keeps coming down. It's like, oh, next door I store a pool. That's my threat. Is that they're higher on the status chain than I am. Sort of thing. Like it comes down to really trivial shit. And when you kind of sit back and listen to the way some people talk or what they're trying to portray as a threat, and you're like, that is so trivial. Like that person just needs to go and find something of value to do.
Do something better with your time.
Yeah, but this comes back to that they probably never had the opportunity to be challenged. Is that like every obstacle from their life has probably been removed before they even got to it, that they haven't developed the capacity, one, to overcome anything of difficulty, or two, they've just constantly had nothing to focus on because their life's been so comfortable.
On that, you said before you were very conscious about your boys and wanting to be around and all that sort of stuff. How do you create those challenges or, create that environment for your kids, knowing what you know?
Yeah, I give them things. I try and give them something to focus on. Like they're kids. Like they can be kids for a long time. Like as they get older and we start to talk, I'll probably try and guide a little bit. But the thing that I'm really cognizant of is they're not me. They don't have my dreams. They're their own person. So I have a lot of conversations with them, and even from an early age, is that almost my job as a parent is, one, to keep them safe and make sure that they don't get in too much danger. But also tell them that I'm going to let them get into a little bit of trouble because they need some skills. And I've got to help them work out who they want to be. And, at 7, they've got no idea. I want to be an astronaut or whatever. Yeah, cool, whatever, go for it. Like a male won't have a frontal lobe till they're like in their early 20s. So they've got a long way to go before they're making any good decisions. So I've got to try and help them make sure that they're inhibiting really dumb decisions almost, because they have no inhibition control either. They're lobeless. They just run around like little dogs. Although they're teenagers now, so they're kind of coming out of that kid stage and it's easy to have conversations with them. But I don't put any challenges in front of them. Like I don't deliberately make anything difficult for them because life will do that for them. Like if I let them go and do things that are going to be challenging. So I've got to be I'm probably more cognizant of not removing obstacles. So any challenge they've got, it's like, all right, you're going to have to solve that. I'm here if you need a hand and I'll help you get through it. You're going to do most of the work. Like I'm not solving this for you. It's on you. It's like, I talk to them all the time. It's like, all right, I'm not coming to your rescue for these things. Like if it's a big thing, ring me because I'm coming to your rescue for big things. I'm coming to help you with big things. But there's little things like they go, oh, I haven't done my homework. It's like, I'm not problem. I'm not coming to rescue you. Or you get to school and they send you an email and go, oh, I left this at home. Can you bring it in? I'm like, nope. You're going to have that conversation yourself. So it's like, it's not coming to their rescue because at 10 years old, the shit's trivial. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to miss out on their dream job because something happened at school when they're 10. No one cares. I couldn't even tell you what happened when I was little. Probably a lot worse than what's happening with them. But it's sort of just helping them with it. So our oldest broke his arm recently and he's mad into his rugby. He did it being a dickhead. And I was like, all right, so now you're going to have to work out where your limit is making dumb decisions because this one's cost you. And it's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, you'll be out of that cast and 6 weeks later you'll be making exactly the same dumb decision. So I was like, I need you to be better at your risk assessment. But the only way to work it out is to actually go across it. You have to know where it ends. Otherwise, how would you ever know? You just got to hope that it's not catastrophic for them. But even then, you almost have to reconcile the fact that there is a probability that your kids are going to get seriously hurt in life. Like you can't remove all the risks. Otherwise, they become depressed, and then that becomes a really big risk factor. So like there's a percentage of really high risk teens for suicide because they have no ability to go and do things. Like they're so sheltered that creates a depression. So how do you get that balance of allowing them the space, but you've got to be willing that you're going to take a risk, or understand that you're going to take a risk. Like there's no certainty here, but then not being the problem. Because if you try and restrict them too much, they're just going to rebel against you. You're going to create other problems. So it's kind of trying to work that out. And this is my first time with a 13-year-old, so I'm making mistakes as I go, like everybody. You know, the internet's got heaps of advice for me, but they don't seem to be doing much better out there either. So yeah, it's kind of just, you break your arm, you're going to miss some rugby. It's not going to end your world. You know what I mean? What can you work on now? When you come back for it, graduate or play, go back into it, you'll be fine. You're not going to miss out on anything.
Yeah.
But he'll learn next time he's injured, it's like, all right, there's a process to this. Like it's not the end of the world. So, they talk about high performance is that talent needs trauma. Whereas a dude I know said talent needs turbulence is probably a better term. But you need it. The kids that do really well in life are the ones that have gone through the right amount of challenge or difficulty, built the skills, because as you get an adult, you go out into the world, things don't get easier out there. Like you're on your own out there. And like society is very much competing against each other too, because everyone wants to have it all. And no one really knows what it is. They just know they have to have it. But it's out there and you're actually working against people quite often. So like if you don't have those skills by the time you leave home, how do they compete in that environment? I'm not saying that that's healthy, but that's where we're at. So you got to give them the skills. Like I talk to me, I need to give you the skills so you can go out and be the best that you can at whatever it is that you want to do. Now, I'm here to help you with that. So as we go through, I make less decisions now than what I did when they were 3. Like at 3 and 4, you're making all decisions. You let them think they're making some, but although my decisions are probably just as shit as theirs at that age at times. But now it's sort of more conversations and trying to help guide it. So, but yeah, trying to give them something to focus on, keep them active. Like, because if I let them sit at home, they get bored. The easiest thing around them is a screen. So they'll jump on there and there's all sorts of horrible shit going on in there. Like, I don't even know who they're talking to. Like, people I wouldn't let into my house are on the other end of that internet connection. So it's about keeping them busy. So I do a lot of activities with them, try and expose them to all different things, encourage them to do stuff. So just a really big range of stuff so that they can work out who they want to be and what it is that they want to do.
You know, maybe is it also framing, like you said, as an adult, and life is not devoid of challenges or hardship. It's about maybe framing how we look at challenges and hardship in a way that's not necessarily negative outlook, so that they're not avoiding those challenges and hardships. Yeah, I listen to what they say a lot. So I listen to what comes out of their mouth. So when something hard is coming out, and when you're 13, there's nothing hard. But yeah, what do you know? Like, you only know the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. So at that age, most kids haven't been through hardship. There's obviously a percentage that have life really difficult, but that's kind of a different context. But for the most kids, is that like life isn't that hard unless you've been in an unfortunate situation. So I listen to a lot of what they say, the language they use, those sort of things, and then try and change their language. Because when you look at a lot of how people behave or their behavior, essentially a lot of it comes back to what they're thinking. So depending on what their thoughts are, everyone is going to have a certain percentage of negative thoughts. Like if you think about something, a negative thought almost pops in straight away. It's like, oh shit, I don't want to do that. Like if I think about going to Antarctica, I'm like, fuck, that's going to be a problem. Like you start thinking about all the things that could go wrong. But then there's another part that just ignores it. It's like, yeah, you know what? If I work out what the problems are, I can solve them. So let's not even worry about that. It's miles away. And if I might not even get there, so I spend time worrying about it. But that's the thing. A lot of your thoughts never actually manifest into anything. But you spend a lot of time thinking these negative thoughts. And it's the same way as if you're turning out, is that it's very easy to get into that, oh shit, this could be bad, this could be this. You know, it's like, yeah, or it could be easy. It could be fucking solved by the time you get there. Yeah.
It's very difficult for us to go into that positive side of things. But that comes back almost to that primitive thing where if we think worst case, then we're more likely to survive. Better safe than sorry. So if I think worst case and I avoid it, then I'm never going to get into a problem in the first place. But we don't have those problems anymore. Like people are thinking negative thoughts about trivial shit. So I talk to them a bit about, okay, well, what's the thinking behind that? because that thinking, whatever it is, creates your belief around whatever it is you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So like back to the stress, if you think, oh, I'm feeling a bit of anxiety, that's bad, something horrible is going to happen. Okay, well, that changes your belief about everything that you do. And then that influences your emotions and the behavior. Where if you think, yeah, it could be tough. Like I'm feeling anxious or I'm preparing for something, I'm not certain what it is, and it could be pretty challenging. We'll just see how it goes. But you know what? On the other side of this, regardless of what happens, is that I'm going to have another exposure to help me, and I'm going to have some fused tools. Like I'll grow on the other side of this. Then that changes your belief around things. Sort of things. So like even back to the adventure racing, is the belief about what I'm capable of has grown over the years based on my thinking or the strength of my vision as to what I can achieve. So when I went for selection, that was the hardest thing that I thought I was ever going to do. So that's my belief at the time. Then I get through it. It's pretty tough. I'm not going to lie about that. And then I go and do the 250K race in the desert. But I've never done anything like that. So I was like, okay, this is going to be really hard. This could be the toughest thing I ever do. Then I go and do that. I was like, oh, that's not too bad. Then I go and do the Yukon, and I do the first one in Alaska. And then I change my complete understanding of how perception of fatigue works. And now I look at things as like, you know what? That's actually not that difficult. I don't have the skills to do it yet. Like I've got to ski across Antarctica. I've never skied in my life cross country. So I've got to learn that skill. It's like, all right, I don't have the skills yet. I'll go learn the skills. I'll talk to the right people. I'll get the information I need. I'll give myself the best chance of success. That doesn't necessarily mean I'll get there, but it's going to be a fucking great journey. So it's a completely different belief about what I'm capable of. But then you start solving all these really big problems. And one of the things I love about the adventure racing stuff is that you're always solving problems. You get really good at identifying problems early and getting motivated to solve them straight away so that you solve a small emerging issue rather than a really complex problem. So you're always learning new things. Like for me, I've really enjoyed them. So now I get to the point where something trivial happens and I was like, why would I care about that?
Yeah.
You know, then, yeah, it's a problem now. Maybe I look bad. Maybe this is going to happen. But in 10 years, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to care. So if I'm not going to care then, why am I going to care now? So a lot of it comes back to that thinking. So I monitor the words because the words give you an indication of what people think.
Yeah.
But even like in an environment like this, something happens, you listen to what people say. You can tell straight away who's going to perform and who isn't. To a degree, based on the language that you're using. People talk themselves out of something straight away. Because they don't have the belief behind it. They don't have belief in themselves because they probably never developed the really good self-esteem that comes from overcoming challenge. There's even a part of your brain that every time you confront challenge, it grows. So you keep overcoming challenge, and that part of your brain, I think it's like called the tenacious brain or something.
The AMC?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Anterior mid-singular.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one. Yeah, the research isn't that old. Like everything, it become really popular shortly, and everyone will be, oh, this is how you stimulate it.
I think that's the Goggins part of the brain. I think that's the
just overrun everything. Yeah. But yeah, that grows. But interestingly, as soon as it's no longer a challenge, it doesn't grow anymore related around it.
So it starts shrinking.
So it's almost like the part of your brain that allows you to overcome challenge.
Yep.
That activity, anyway.
Would it be fair to say, like in your case, though, your belief, like if you look at, I'm going to learn to ski across Antarctica, that's built on your prior experiences and the things that you've
So it's easy
done.
to sit here and say that, but would I say that if I didn't have all that behind me? Probably not.
Probably not.
Like everything, the good, the bad, the indifferent stuff, all of that has led me to here. And it's the same as when you talk about complexity, is that where I'm at right now is an emergent property of everything I've done. So if you change any of that, where I am right now changes. Maybe if I did some things better, it would be in a better place. I don't know. They're really nice. I'm here and I'll deal with what I got. But yeah, so like I think sometimes you have to overcome. You have to overcome the challenge to get to that point. Like people are far more capable than they give themselves credit to. They just have to get that belief.
And build a belief by doing.
Yeah, it comes through doing.
Yep. So like I'm just thinking like in our context, that chaotic, dealing with those chaotic, complex environments, back to that training thing, it's about doing and going through those cycles and those scenarios and building that familiarity in those contexts.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And they go a long way in building it, sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that people can't, at the start point, have the belief like, okay, I haven't done any of that yet, but if I get moving and I start overcoming things, who knows where I could end up.
Yeah, right. So it's not solely contingent on experience.
No. But if you have the belief that, okay, if I lean into this stuff and my outcomes are going to be awesome, where if I try and avoid everything and I'm really negative, then you don't even pay attention in the first place. So the mechanisms involved in learning is shut down. Is their outcomes are worse, way worse.
So you've got to be prepared to lean into it and expecting almost that challenges will arise, hardships will arise, but having that belief within yourself that you'll overcome them and learn from them.
Yeah. And then the understanding that when you need extra resources or lean on people, you have to lean on them. You have to seek help with things. Like I talk about doing solo stuff, but there's a whole team of people that I rely on to help get me there. Like it's me getting to the end of something. It's only that last bit that's me.
Yep.
And even that is influenced by all the people that I've had help me throughout that point or up to that point.
That's awesome, mate. When are you doing it? When are you aiming for crossing Antarctica?
End of next year.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So
we spoke briefly before on air, and you're saying it's 70 to 90-day window.
Yeah, up to 90 days. So 90 days is about what I'll plan for. Yep. So potentially be on my own for 90 days.
Oh, it's a lot of time in your own head.
I don't know if that's good or bad. I do make jokes that I've only got to put up with one dickhead when I'm out there. I don't know how it's going to go. I got no idea how I'm going to go after an extended period. From experience, what I can sort of anticipate will happen is that it'll take me 4 to 5 days to kind of get down to my functioning point. From the first day, it's almost like you're just going into a hole. Seems about 3 to 5 day point, you kind of leveled out, and then that's just where you function from. You kind of just get used to it. And then after a point in time, that's just your life. Like it's that's day to day. Yeah. Once you get into it and you get used to it, that's just day to day.
That's that adaptation.
Yeah. You just sort of get familiar with what it is. And then as long as I'm fueling myself and I'm not in an actual physiological decline, then you can do it for really extended periods. Like if you're getting the essentials that you need, like food, water, sleep, you do it as long as you want. Until the weather comes in. That's why they give you 90 days.
Yes.
Because once the big blizzards come, they can't come get you. But then you're risking other people's lives for your individual challenge, and that's not something that I'm interested in.
Mate, outside of your adventure race across, or your solo trek across Antarctica, what else is going on in your life?
At the moment, I'm taking a bit of a break. So I took a bit of a break from work just because of it clashed with family commitments. So when I was in the military, I put family first. So for me, it was decisions from that point on would be made around what's best for the family and the kids. So so I've recently left work just because travel commitments and a few other things meant that if I kept working, my kids would miss out on before and after school activities. So but fine. So I've taken a bit of a break. Not too sure what I'm going to do. So I started studying neuroscience stuff just to sort of keep myself active, and always been interested in it. And I've got the time. And then I'll sort of work out what I want to do from there. But probably still passionate about the training space and the development. So whether that is looking for a permanent role within an organisation at some point, or whether I start to look at doing it on my own, I'm not too sure about. I do know from experience that to make real change, you have to be in the organisation, and you have to be willing to put up with all the barriers that come from change. But that doesn't say, you turn up, I know how things work, you have to listen to me. It's like turning up and working out, okay, well, what can I help add value to here? Type of thing. I just know there's a lot of the training that I've seen is outdated because there's some much better science out there now. We've got access to better things, and we shouldn't be doing things just because that's how we've been doing it. So what that looks like, I'm not too sure, but you can reach a bigger audience when you're doing it on your own. So I did write an evidence-based guide when I was in the police service for trying to develop training methodology. So I've been considering going back, rewriting that, and then just making like a publicly available version of it. Depends how much time I get, because it takes a bit of work.
Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, hopefully, I imagine if you do go back to an organisation full time, whoever gets you, are doing pretty well. So, yeah, I'm sure wherever you go, whatever you do, mate, you're going to have a positive effect.
I'll look around, see it'll be something that challenges me as well. So I'll see what's out there.
Awesome.
Come work for us, mate. That'll be a challenge.
Has to be close to home too. That's one of the other things.
Yeah.
Mate, well, you got any more questions?
No, I'm very, very fulfilled with all that information. It just, everything you were saying just leans so much into my world that I'm playing at the moment with instructing, and just makes absolute sense.
Yep.
Saying.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming along and sharing your absolute wealth of knowledge with us, mate. Really, really appreciate it. I know I got a lot out of it today. So hopefully everyone else does as well. I'm sure they will. Good luck for Antarctica.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll probably hear about it if it goes spectacularly bad.
Just quickly on that though, if someone wants to follow you along and wants to keep tabs on, how you're going with that specifically, or with anything else you're doing, how can people do that?
So yeah, it's just social media. So I'm mostly active on Instagram and LinkedIn. So I mostly just do personal stuff on LinkedIn just to annoy everyone on there that's over business. That's type. But yeah, that's just Daniel Cooper on LinkedIn, and then Dan Cooper _PhD on Instagram.
Yeah, cool.
So
Highly recommend jump on and give yourself a follow, because you put some good stuff out there.
you can tell how interested I am with social media by the regularity of my posts. So sometimes I go missing because I couldn't be bothered.
Quality over quantity, hey?
Well, you can tell what I'm pissed off about. I try not to post pissed off because it's usually trivial stuff that I shouldn't be worrying about. But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. So always happy to try and help with the training stuff, because for me, if you're instructing in emergency services, you're not just instructing the person. Like, the consequences for bad instruction there are massive. So for me, it's like they deserve the best instruction they can because their job's already hard. Yeah. So always happy to help out with what I can, and happy to answer any questions. So
yeah, awesome. Cheers, mate. Thanks again, mate. Thanks for your extensive career in the military too. Thanks for your service.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I did most of that because I enjoyed it. So, but I always appreciate the sentiment.
Awesome, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, no, welcome.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by subscribing, liking, and rating the podcast on your listening and social media platforms. We are always looking to improve what we do. If you have feedback, suggestions for further guests, topics, or would like to be a guest yourself, please contact us via Instagram.
Stop the scene repeating word by word.